Welcome everyone. Glad to see you on my channel. Today I will tell you about an unusual story, an amazing story about companionship and love. I wish you a pleasant audience.
Carlos was born into an ordinary family. His mother and father were simple laborers. His mother worked as a school teacher and his father as a turner at the factory. The boy always looked up to him and didn't want him to have that. "Why do you judge me?" his father would ask him sometimes. "Who told you I was judging you?" the boy would look at him. "I see the way you look when I come home from work," the man said. "Yeah, I don't want to work for my uncle, especially still such hard labor that pays low," David declared when he was only in 5th grade. "Well, I'll watch you go out and get a better job," grinned his father. "I won't get a job at all. I'll work for myself," the boy told him. Let's see how you do it. Don't say got before you jump." The father was sure that all children have ambitions, and when they grow up, they become more down to earth. "What makes you think I can't do it?" the boy argued with the man. "I too, when I was little, dreamed of many things, that I would travel, that I would have many friends, money, and everything else. But as you can see, none of that came true," he said. "You'll see, I'll succeed," the boy insisted. "Okay, I'm not telling you anything. It will work out. It will work out. Great. And if not, I'll be right." He smiled at his child. The boy continued to study at school. He had a lot of friends. Already from childhood, he was enterprising. He always had several pens, erasers, pencils in his pencil case. And if before a test for dictation, someone did not have something, he could sell or trade for something. He was loved for that, but at the same time, he was considered a hustler. "Why do you take offense at me? If I didn't have a pen, what would you use to write with?" It's all clear that nothing. Guys and girls realize that he makes good not only for himself, but also for them. "Why do you resent me then?" Carlos didn't understand it. "No, it's just a shame that someone didn't think of it sooner than you did." At recess, they were running around, pulling girls' pigtails. Everything was just like normal kids. "Where did you get new mittens again?" Mom said to her son. "I bought them at the market," he answered her. "And where did you get the money?" The woman marveled. "He earned it. He did not hide from anyone that he sells pens and pencils at school." "Well, Carlos, look, someone will kick your ears for it someday." His mother threatened him with her finger. "I won't," he told her. The boy was already in high school. He planned to join the army and then start his own business. "Oh, Carlos, you've got a lot on your mind, sitting at the table with your father." "Why imagine? It's all real here. Look." He put a notebook in front of him. "I have a business plan already written here." "And what is it?" Father looked at some figures. "Oh, you don't understand anything. Look." And he began to explain to him what and how he was going to do. "No, these numbers are a force for me." My father pushed the notebook away from him. "Well, you do not understand. And then why do you ask me to show you something?" The father looked at his son and saw that he is still a few years old, but he already understands a lot of things in business. "Well, do you have a girl?" the man asked him. "Why are you interested?" The guy smiled. "I just want to know how young people behave now," he told him. "Yes, there is one in mind, but I do not yet make any steps in her direction," admitted the young man. "And why?" wondered his father. "And because in a few years I will have to go to the army, and she will wait for me or not, it is unknown. And I do not want to start building relationships just like that," reasoned the boy. "But why just so? You will at least understand how to behave with a girl, what to do, where to drive," advised his father. "I'll leave it all." Carlos told them they were going fishing. "Are you sure you won't freeze?" Mom was worried about them. "No, we're warmly dressed," they said back. Carlos liked to go to the lake with his father. There they would drill a hole, put a line with a hook in it, and then pull out different fish. "We had a catch today." My father lifted the container with fish. "Yes, for a long time we have not hunted like this." My son also touched the heaviness of the bucket. We returned home happy and tired. School was coming to an end. We had to salute the motherland. "Well, are you ready?" asked his father. "For what?" Looked at him, son. "To service in the army." He recalled those years. For the umpteenth time, the man took out an army album, and together with his son, they flipped through it. "Wasn't it hard for you there?" For some reason, Carlos started to worry now. "No, I remember even with nostalgia," rolled his father's eyes. Carlos learned to play the guitar and bought it to take with him. "Did you meet a girl?" his father asked him. "I'm still talking to that one," the boy told him. "And what if she does? Will you be together?" the father asked his son. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. He did not want to rush things. At the send-off, they walked very cheerfully. Juliet did not lead Carlos's step. "Why are you sticking to me?" he told her. "Carlos, I'll wait for you, I promise," she swore to him. He didn't want to give her any hope. "What's to see?" she said. "I'll wait for you, so I'll wait for you." She even stomped her foot. The next day at the station, he got on the train and went. Juliet waved at him for a long time. "Well, daughter, will you wait for me?" The boy's father came up to her. "Of course, I promised." She looked up at him and shrugged her shoulders. "Let's go." He put his arm around her shoulders. They got home. Juliet helped clear the table, swept the floors. "Oh, thank you, girl," Carlos's mother told her. "Oh, you're welcome," she smiled. After that, Juliet went home and sat down at the table to write her first letter to Carlos. Carlos wrote often, but mostly about the weather, about everyday things. What they were doing. Juliet wrote more about love. She wanted to put all her feelings on the page, but it did not work, so she just waited. Carlos' service did not seem like honey. Every day some tasks, orders, letters home and from home, these were his favorite moments. When it was time to return, he realized that Juliet was really the girl he wanted to be with and spend many years of his life with. She met him at the train station. He saw her from the window, and when he got off the train, he immediately went over and hugged her. After that, they went home, where the table was already waiting. They invited their friends and had a very good dinner. Carlos told them all about their service, what had happened, what had not happened. "It's nice to sit here at home at my parents' table," he said. "What are you planning to do now? Are you going to study somewhere?" his father asked him. "Most likely, I will go, but not full-time, but by correspondence," the son told them. "And what will you do yourself?" was the interest of those present at the table. "And myself, I will take out my old notebook, where I showed you my business plan, and begin to work quietly," Carlos frankly with his father. "I see. What about Juliet?" Carlos was curious. "And what Juliet? She is studying, preparing to become a specialist in administration," he told him. "Well, wow," Dad even whistled. Carlos needed his first capital to start a business, so he went and got a job at the factory where his father worked. "Hey, guys," he walked into the locker room. "Hey, if you're not kidding," they shook hands. "How's it going in here?" Carlos asked them. "It's like everywhere else, normal. Some days good, some days bad, some days easy, some days hard," they told him. Carlos looked at his box, nodded his head, and went to see what was going on in the shop. "It's not bad here," he looked around. "We're not complaining," they said. After a week of work, the men gathered in the locker room. "So, who's in favor of sitting down tonight?" one of them asked. "I don't think anyone would mind," Carlos said. "Yes, indeed, you're getting a drink tonight," they laughed at him. Carlos shopped. He was one of the first to arrive, started to wash the meat, and turned on the music. "What's that playing?" The others were surprised. "Yes, there was a song of the year on TV. I recorded it on a tape recorder because I couldn't listen to it," he shared with his comrades. "Wow, can you record it for me?" Colleagues began to ask. "Of course I can't, but it will not be free," he told them, and from the next day began his trips to wholesale bases in larger cities. There he bought both blank cassettes and cassettes with recordings, so that he could rewrite something from them. "Carlos, can you record today?" They came up to him before the weekend night. "Sure, but I don't have a lot of tapes," he counted in his mind. He didn't even think it could work out this way. By now, Juliet had graduated and was working in administration. They continued to date Carlos. Everything was going well for them. "So, when's the wedding?" his father asked him. "As soon as possible," Carlos told him. They did talk about it with the girl, but both of them needed to get back on their feet. In the summer, Juliet went to get a new position in the administration, and Carlos stayed at the factory for the time being. But on weekends, he would take a large bag, put some cassettes and a tape recorder in it, and go out to the square. He would stand next to the grandmother selling seeds. "How's the trade going?" his father would ask him at home after he came home from work. "It's booming," he'd point to his empty bag. I congratulate you. His father couldn't believe that someone really wanted those tapes. But the son went on. He distributed them all at the factory, sold them in the square on weekends, and by the end of the year, he told everyone that he was leaving the factory because he had bought a stall. And what? You're going to work there yourself? His wife didn't believe him. Why not? He didn't understand her. She laughed, but Carlos didn't see anything funny. It was serious, too serious for him. Now that he had more free time, he went to the wholesale market every week. Juliet helped him with the covers. She photocopied them at work. The young man stayed up day and night, writing the tapes aloud, making sure none of them chewed up or did anything else. The business went. There was a lot of work, but Carlos did not grumble. He coped with everything. He realized that further will only be better. At work, he went to work every day. Everything he did well. There were a lot of customers, and the city was a monopolist. What are you doing today? His wife came home from work in the evening. Carlos was sitting at the table with a bottle of brandy and some snacks. I'm celebrating my success, he said. Isn't it early? She grinned. I don't think so. Sit with me, Carlos invited her. He'd been self-employed for a year. He was doing well. The money wasn't much yet, but it was starting to come in. Maybe we could buy an apartment or trade for ours, his wife suggested. Look for options, he told her. By this time, Juliet was already working as a chief specialist in the youth department. She liked this job, mainly because she only worked with young families, which she herself was a part of. She had a colleague, a young girl who lived with her grandmother. Anna, do you know if anyone is selling an apartment around here? Julieta once asked her. What do you want to buy? She asked. Yes, we are thinking of expanding, maybe change mine with an extra payment, the woman shared with her. Listen, let me talk to my grandmother. Maybe we'll change our 3-room apartment because we have a lot of it. The girl had complained before that the utility bills are too high. Listen, and I will not even mind. The apartment is very close to the administration, to work hand in hand, and in the center, said Sarah. In the evening, she came home and told her husband about it. He also approved of this option. And the next day, they went to see how everything was inside. Since her grandmother lived in the apartment, everything was perfect. The neighbors are normal. They quickly agreed on an extra payment, and in a month, Carlos and Juliet were already moving their things. Oh, I probably won't carry these bags up to the 3rd floor, Juliet said. Why not? Carlos wondered. I think I'm expecting a baby, she said. And you were silent. He put his arm around her and spun her around just outside the entryway. It's not for sure, she laughed. He couldn't believe he was about to become a father. Things were going even better than before. Now there was a big apartment. They had to buy furniture for it, and for that they had to work hard. Carlos continued to make cassettes. Now he had a salesman working at his stall. He bought a car and hired a driver to go with him to pick up the goods. So far, everything was working out as he had planned. Juliet was indeed pregnant. She was now walking around with a huge belly and was getting ready to go on maternity leave. Did you think who would be? Her husband looked at her. No, I specifically told the doctors not to tell me anything. She was cryptic. 2 weeks before the birth, she was admitted to the hospital. Juliet didn't resist because she didn't want to be twitchy when it started. It started at 9 o'clock in the evening. There was a sharp prickling in her stomach, then a tutting. Juliet had read about it, so she already knew that her baby would soon be born. It was very painful, but she tolerated it. And then the baby cried in the room. Congratulations, you have a boy, they told her and placed a lump on her chest. Alfredushka, said the new mom. She was humbled as she watched and touched her son. Carlos came in the next day first thing in the morning. Juliet showed him her son through the window, but he couldn't wait for the discharge. He arrived with balloons, flowers, gifts for the doctors. Hello, my darlings, he greeted them on the porch. Hello, she hugged her husband. Together they got into the car and drove home. Grandparents were already waiting for them there. Grandson, hello. Everyone was very happy about the birth of a new member of the family, and the grandparents on her husband's side did it most of all. That's it. Now do you have a real family, said the father to his son. Yes, now I'm a father too, Carlos told him. He did not stop. He kept working, and soon the stall was a thing of the past. He was building pavilions. In one, he was going to continue working, and in the other, he was going to open a new store. The further the work went on, the more the income became. The boy was growing up, pleased his parents. Everything was good in the family's life, but it couldn't last long because Juliet began to work late more and more often. "Where have you been again?" Carlos met her late at night at her apartment. "You have no idea how much work I have," she undressed. "What do I care about your work? I buy everything we live on," he said. "The clothes, the apartment, the car, I bought it all." "Yes, you bought it all, but so that no one interferes with you," I agreed. "I still have some weight in society." She put the kettle on the stove. What weight do you have in society?" He didn't understand. Juliet was by now the assistant to the head of the city. She dealt with many issues with the construction site, as well as the rewriting of the land on which the pavilion stood in her husband's name. Every day she started coming later and later. Carlos was nervous. He couldn't understand why his wife wasn't home so often. "Quit your job. My one paycheck is enough," he told her. "No, I am moving up the career ladder. I have a little more to go and I will become a deputy," she told him. "What is this official work of yours? It pays pennies and demands a lot." He did not understand her. Carlos practically never left home. He was always there. One day some friends came to see him. "Carlos, how many years, how many winters closed here in four walls and do not go anywhere?" they told him. The men set the table and sat around it. "Come on, let's get together more often." One of them raised the first glass. Juliet came home when they were still sitting at the table. "What's this gathering?" She didn't understand. "Oh, you go out every day, you're allowed, but I can't go out with my friends," Carlos told her. "Why not? You can, but sit quietly." So as not to disturb the neighbors, she shrugged her shoulders and went to her son's room. The friends sat for a while and began to disperse. "Come to me again," the owner of the apartment told them. No sooner had the door slammed behind the friends than Juliet jumped on her husband. "And what does it all mean? Look what a mess you left behind. Who will clean it all up?" she said to him. "Why did you start? I'll clean it up." He went to the kitchen and sat down at the table. "I'm the one that's acting up." She came in there. That evening they had a whole scandal. It had never happened before. Carlos was bored at home alone. He did not know where to go, so he gave a vacation to the salesman and went to work. Now he wasn't home either, not during the day, not at night. "So, where are you disappearing now?" his wife told him. "Where it is necessary, there and disappeared. I earn money, I get it." He snapped at her. "How are you talking to me?" She didn't understand. "What am I talking to you? We have money, but we cannot spend it anywhere. We cannot even have a normal vacation anywhere," he said. "I have to sit at home all day. And who is to blame? Now you are at work, so go on." She did not speak for a long time. Alfred went to the 3rd grade. His parents continued to live and fight. It was impossible to catch either of them at home. "Carlos, hi," a friend called him. "Hello," he answered him. "There is such a topic. Do you want to take part in an interesting game?" he asked him. "What kind of game?" he asked him. "Successful people dress up as homeless people and have to live without money for a few days," he explained to him. "Why, it's interesting." The man was interested. "If you are interested, then come to my firm tomorrow. I will explain everything to you in detail," said his friend, and hung up the phone. Carlos did not tell anyone anything. He wanted to wait until tomorrow and then see how it would be. "Juliet, I have to go away for a few days. Don't lose me," he told his wife. "Where else do you have to go? Your work is not connected with business trips." She was surprised. "I'll explain everything to you later," he told her. It was exciting. He went to bed. The next day he waited till evening and went to his friend's place where he had invited him. "Hey," he walked into his office. "Oh, Carlos, hi. So you're in?" His friend looked at him with curiosity. "I said I agree. I'm tired of sitting alone at home," he sighed. "Then listen, now you leave here all your clothes, money, phone, and everything else. I'll give you some simple clothes, you could say a robe, and I'll send you to the 4 corners of the world. You'll be in town with no money, no phone, no everything. You'll have to find a man to help you, and then, if you want, you can thank him." He explained the rules to him. "So what if I can't do it?" He backed up. "If you fail, call me from somewhere or come and we'll put everything back the way it was," his friend told him. There was no problem with that. Carlos liked the idea so much he changed his clothes, emptied out everything he had in his pockets. His friend drove him to another neighborhood and left him there. He was confused at first, but after half an hour he pulled himself together and went to one of the caves there. "Man, come out," said the guard at the entrance. "It's so cold outside. Can I warm myself? Are you not a human being?" Carlos realized he had a homeless look. "I told you to get out of this cafe and go to some diner." The guard shook her head. "Okay, excuse me." Carlos walked out and headed where the guard showed him. "Excuse me, hello. Can I ask you for some tea? But I don't have any money," he said to the diner clerk. "Yes, of course," he replied and made him tea in a plastic cup. "Thank you very much." Carlos took it and went to the table. "Here, have some more." He handed him some pastries. "Thank you. I'll never forget you." She looked at him with eyes as if he hadn't eaten in 3 days. Which was half true, because there wasn't a crumb in his mouth this morning. "Hey buddy, you got a problem?" A man with the same look as him. "You're in trouble yourself," he laughed back. "Come with me," the man called out to him. "I'll finish my food and we'll go." Carlos burned himself, but he drank his tea. After that, he and his new acquaintance left the diner and headed deep into the neighborhood. "Where are we going?" Carlos asked the man. "We'll get warm," he promised. They came to an abandoned heating main, and the new acquaintance rummaged around behind the pipes and pulled out a small bottle. "What is it?" Carlos didn't understand. "Suvref," Roger told him in a low voice. They unsealed the bottle and took a sip straight from the throat. Carlos shuddered. "Is it strong?" "But it'll warm you right up," his new acquaintance told him. They sat like that until nightfall, and now they had to find a place to sleep. So Roger took him to one of the houses. There they went down into the cellar and slept on the pipes. In the morning they had to find something to eat, and that's what they did. "How'd you get like that?" Carlos was wondering how people like that get down. "I had a normal job, a family, a kid, a wife, everything. And then one day I blew it all. I just had one drink with my friends. Then my wife kicked me out of the house. I thought I could do it all, so I got to this life," he sighed. "And how did you do?" "I was pretty much the same. I had everything. I didn't appreciate anything." Carlos imagined it as if it were real and he was scared. By evening they said goodbye and he drove back to his friend. "So, did you like it?" he wondered. "I did. It was so romantic," he told him. Carlos changed his clothes again and went home. What do you smell?" Juliet recoiled from him. "I played a little game that an old acquaintance of mine gave me," he admitted to her. "What kind of game?" She didn't understand. "I'll tell you later." He didn't want to tell her. Carlos went to the bathroom, took a shower, came out, went into the kitchen. "Wife, what are we having for dinner tonight?" He was hungry as a hungry wolf. Carlos ate. He immediately felt better. He didn't know why, but he really liked this game. He was ready to play it again. But now he was already playing the game himself. He would change his clothes and go to some unfamiliar neighborhood. No one would recognize him in the clothes he was wearing, and it amused him. His wife never figured it out, and Carlos never told her. "Where are you all the time?" she'd tell him. "I work," he'd just tell her. "What kind of work do you have that stinks? Your clothes don't wash," she told him. "Leave it to the machine," Carlos said, even though he had long thought that after each walk he should throw them away. Now every day he changed into some old clothes that he had specially ordered on websites, stained them, and went for a walk. On the street he met all sorts of people, had a drink with them, talked about life. "So how are things going there?" Carlos asked his old acquaintance. "Everything's fine." He waved his hand at him. "Are the dogs growing?" Last time he told him that the bitch where he works had gotten pregnant. "Of course they're growing. 2 are dead and 6 are left. Do you need a dog by any chance?" Bernard asked. "No," Carlos answered him. "I don't need a dog." He smiled to himself, wondering what his wife would think if he came home with a dog. So every day he walked around the city, not touching anyone, trying to get warm somewhere to eat. It was even interesting. It was like he was still playing a game. Juliet was building her career. She had already managed to work as the head of a kindergarten, and then she was put in charge of another one. And then she was promoted to deputy head. "Are you happy now that your dream has come true?" Carlos asked her one day. Of course, what a leap up the career ladder. She made big eyes. "Say, but if you were approached by a homeless person, would you help him?" My husband wondered. Why such questions? She did not understand. Just so, decided to ask. He looked at her point blank. I do not know. Depending on what question would be addressed, she shrugged her shoulders. Well, I'd ask for food or money, he suggested. I don't know, but you'd help. She turned the tables on him. I think I would. He averted his eyes. I see you've been hanging out with them a lot, she told him, revealing that she knew a lot about him. Bernard, whom he now met almost every day, invited him to a party. I didn't know homeless people had holidays too, Carlos was surprised. Do you still have any change, by any chance? His new friend asked him. Carlos took some money with him so that he wouldn't starve like last time. So he went out, and they didn't even give him any tea. So he came home hungry as a wolf. The days were already warmer, so the men went under the bridge. There in an iron barrel they made a fire, took out what they had. Carlos bought sausages, bread, and a bottle of vodka. Oh wow, we're living today. Rubbed hands with those who were with him today. A little bit of money, he said. So, who has anything else? They asked each other, but no one else had anything except small bottles of vodka from the drugstore. As they talked, Carlos didn't notice how drunk he was getting. He was almost out of his mind. It was getting late, and he felt his feet were freezing. Hey, get up, he heard someone slapping his cheeks. Aha, he mumbled. After that, he was loaded into some car, taken somewhere, and then he found himself in the police station. He was thrown on a hard bench, and Carlos was still awake for a long time. When he woke up, it was daytime outside, so either he'd been in the dumpster all night or he'd slept here. Hey, warden, he called out to the man in the uniform. Sit there and shut up, he snapped at him. Look, I'm entitled to one call. Let me call and they'll come get me right away. Pay you whatever you want, Carlos said, tongue lolling. What do you think you are, a millionaire? The staff laughed at him. Let me make a call, he told them. Well, shall we? One looked at the other. He didn't even have a phone with him, said one employee to another. Well, give me yours, he asked. Well, let's give it to him, at least let's make fun of this bum. It was obvious that they had nothing to do. They handed him the phone behind bars. He immediately dialed his home number. Hello, Juliet. Hi, can you come for me? He gave her the address of the department, but before that he asked the staff. What she answered him, they did not hear, but they laughed for a long time. Now another homeless woman will come to help out her lover, one teased. How dare you insult my wife? She works in the administration, Carlos said. Ah, and I am the Pope, laughed even harder young people. She'll come and you'll see for yourself, he told them. What an ambitious homeless man we got, the staff said among themselves. An hour passed, 2, 3, but no one came. So, where's your Juliet? Is she still coming? They were still laughing at him. She's coming and you'll be amazed at who my wife is, Carlos told them. His head ached, his stomach twisted. He couldn't stand to be here waiting for her. The door slammed. A woman entered the room. Hello, I need to pick up my husband, she said. The duty officer looked at her and could not believe his eyes. In front of him stood the first deputy mayor. Are you sure your husband is here? He asked her. He recently called me and dictated this address. She pressed her lips. She could not stand and wait. Okay, go this way. He showed her the direction. Juliet walked down the corridor, entered the office, sat down opposite the young man. Hello, what did you want? He looked at her. I came to pick up my husband. He called me 3 hours ago, she repeated to him again. Probably you are mistaken. Your husband is not here. There's only some homeless man whom we picked up on the street at night, drunk and barefoot, he told her. Can I see him? She asked. Yes, of course. The employee was very surprised. They walked over to where Carlos was. Juliet saw him, stood with her arms at her sides. What do you call this? She asked. Juliet, let's get to the house and there I'll explain everything to you, he told her. All right, get up. Let's go. Let him go, she addressed the lawman. You need to write a statement, he told her. All right, let's go. I'll sign and fill everything out, she sighed, and followed the young man. When all the paperwork was filled out, Carlos was released. For a long time, the staff looked after the couple leaving. Do you think it's really his wife, or do you think they just know each other? One asked the other. Listen, are you interested? The other one asked him. Of course I'm interested. When he said he had the right to one call, we all laughed at him, and the deputy head came. How do you think such a woman could come for a homeless man? He reasoned. It doesn't matter. He was taken away and let them go, he said, and went to the seat. Well, what was it? They were sitting in the car. Juliet, it's a game, and you can say that I played it, he tried to explain. What kind of game? She didn't understand. This is the kind of game my friend dragged me into, and now I'm doing it myself. He didn't look at her. No, you explain to me why you're like that. You stink. You're not washed. She wrinkled her nose. I'm sorry, love. He wanted to hug her, but she pulled away. Come home, wash up, then we'll talk about forgiveness, she said squeamishly. Okay, he agreed with her. Now it was necessary to be decent for a while to make it up to his wife. Carlos tried his best at everything, but he was still drawn to walking around the city at night in rags so no one would recognize him. He held on as long as he could. Alfred, would you like to go on an overnight fishing trip? Carlos asked his son one day. I want to. The boy looked at his mother, waiting for approval. What will you do there? She wondered. Nothing, my father and I used to go like this very often, Carlos recalled. All right, you go and I'll take care of business, she agreed. From that moment on, they started traveling to rivers, forests, and other things. So, are you ready to go fishing? His father asked him. Always ready, he answered and laughed. Here you go, he gave him a shovel. What's that for? Alfred wondered. What for what, and what are you going to do just like that, without bait? Father was laughing now. Oh, I see, Alfred realized. So they began to spend many days and nights together. I like traveling with you so much, the son confessed to his father. And I like spending time with you, he told him. I used to be like that, with my father everywhere, Carlos told Alfred. We're men, he was having fun. Do you want me to put you in my business? Carlos asked. Sure, he'd been thinking about it for a long time. Well, in a couple of years you'll be able to take over the business, his father promised him. I can't wait. That's when the fishing rod shook. Dad, it's biting, the boy whispered. Hush, don't move. He took the net and was ready to hook. There was a huge fish in the net. This is going to be our soup, Carlos laughed. He immediately remembered how hungry he had been when he walked around town in rags. He could use this fish then. The tent was standing, the fire was burning, and all that was left was to pour water into the pot and hang it over the fire. Well, are you ready to peel potatoes? Father asked. Of course, Alfred took a knife and started peeling potatoes. Oh, this is going to make a shitsa, Carlos said, anticipating the tasting. Yes, Alfred echoed him. Next time we'll go to the woods and we'll have pear cakes, his father told him. We will, his son agreed. They would return home happy and with a catch. Juliet was not at home. It is not known where she was. Carlos dropped everything. He decided to take care of the son. He did everything with him. Helped him with his homework, took him camping. He was always at the store with him. Son, if your mom and I get a divorce, will you stay with me or with her? His father asked him. What if you do? The boy looked at him with surprised eyes. No one knows what will happen next. Carlos was sure of it. I can't answer that question for you right now, but it's likely that I'll stay with you. He didn't look at him. Okay, we'll talk about it later. Carlos agreed with him. Juliet came home from work very late. She wasn't expecting it, but her husband was waiting for her in the kitchen. Why aren't you asleep? She wondered. I'm waiting for you. He looked up at her with tired eyes. Well, here I am, I came. She sat down on the chair opposite him. Where have you been? He asked her, looking his wife straight in the eyes. At work, Juliet sighed, while not looking at Carlos. I don't believe it. He shook his head. And believe me, you have no idea how much work I have. She got up to make herself some tea. I guess you and I are going to get a divorce, he said quietly. What? She asked it so loudly that Carlos even flinched. Why, you and I hardly see each other. We are each at our own jobs, he told her. What are you talking about? You and I have a child together. Juliet was startled. So what? He's with me all the time. Carlos had excuses for everything. Then I'm suing, the woman said. Fine, then I'll countersue. Carlos agreed with her. Do what you want, but you're a simple businessman, and I'm practically a government official, so I don't know which side the law will be on. Juliet stood up from the table. She was sure that the child would be left with her, because first of all, children are not often left with their fathers, and secondly, all the rights are on her side. All right, think of it this way, he smiled. The very next day, Juliet went to court to file for divorce, division of property, and who the child would stay with. Carlos did the same thing. They were told the hearing would be within a month. Dad, like I said, I want to stay with you. Alfred came to him and sat down next to him. I would like that too, but now it all depends on what the court decides, he told him. I hope he will consider my opinion, hoped the boy. You will definitely be asked, his father was sure of it. The trial took place 3 weeks later. Carlos' side was heard first, followed by Juliet. And now I invite the boy himself. Alfred came out and stood behind the podium. Tell me, who did you want to stay with? The judge asked him. I would like to stay with my father, but I feel sorry for my mother too. He looked at her. At that moment, the woman cried. So you still have to make a decision, the judge insisted. So I stay with the father. Juliet sat and could not believe her ears. She thought that her connections and everything else would help her to keep the child. And Carlos sat there thinking that his money would help keep the baby with him. And now when he heard Alfred say he wanted to stay with his father, it was like a balm to his soul. The three of them went home together. I think I'm expecting a child again, she said. And you're sure it's mine? He looked at her. Of course, I had no one else but you in work, the woman told him. Why did we go for this divorce then? He didn't understand. I thought you wouldn't go all the way. She wouldn't look him in the eye. Are we going to have a baby? He asked her. Yes, I would like this child. Alfred at this point heard the conversation between mom and dad and was glad to himself that they were not splitting up. The family arrived home. Everything seemed to be the same as before, only Juliet was constantly unwell. Carlos was by her side all the time. She was home more and more often because she was having a hard time. Who would have thought that we would have to get a divorce and divide the property to get things going again? Carlos laughed. They continued to live together, but things weren't the same anymore. You know, you're like my best friend now, Juliet told him. No, best friends don't give birth to children, he answered her laughing. Carlos decided to go back to the old games again. His son was getting older and he wanted to share with him. Alfred, do you want to play a game with me? He asked him one day. What kind of game? The boy was interested. We put on all kinds of rags, leave all the things at home, as well as money, go to the streets of the city. We need to survive at least 2 days and not starve to death. He told him the rules. What kind of game is this? He didn't understand. You'll see, you'll like it, his father said. By this time, Juliet was in the hospital. She didn't know what Carlos was up to. They were back on the city streets. The man took the boy where he knew he was going. It was summer outside. His old acquaintances were under the bridge. Oh, what people and no guards, they greeted him. Yes, you played a good joke on me last time. He remembered the last time they had celebrated here. Come on, don't mind. Things happen in life, they laughed. Alfred looked at all this. He didn't like it much. Dad, why don't we go home? He told him. Come on, it's just beginning, Carlos said. They saw that those who were already here had fun fairs again. The fun began. Carlos, don't be shy, Bernard told him, and Carlos relaxed as much as he could. While Juliet was lying in state, father and son managed to get out on the streets of the city 3 times. Thanking his friends today, Carlos put the money and everything else in his pockets. He also took his cell phone with him. Juliet was due back in the morning, so he didn't want to upset her. Hi, they met at the train station with some friends. Wow, what a dandy. They were surprised to see their old acquaintance. It's okay, I'll buy you a drink tonight. He showed them the money. They got on the train. The man wanted to take them out of town for a civilized walk. Now we will come. You will see how good everything is there, the master of life told his friends. They arrived at a small house that Carlos had rented. They made themselves comfortable there. The friends, who had never seen such a thing, immediately scattered to the corners. I invite you to the table, Carlos shouted to them. All gathered around the table. It was fun and heartwarming. I want to raise my glass to you, Carlos said the first toast. And we to you. They looked at him and didn't understand why he was driving them around. Juliet was at home. She asked her son where his father was. Do you know what games he plays? Alfred looked at her. No, she stared at the boy. He disguises himself as a homeless person and then walks under the bridge with others like him, Alfred told her. Here we go again, she sighed. Today, he took money and a phone from home to celebrate and thank his friends, her son kept telling her. God, this has happened before and I had to bail him out, and now I don't even know, she waved her hands. Have to bail him out? Alfred became concerned. We should call him, she said and picked up the phone, but it was disconnected. I know where he went because I was supposed to be with him. The son got up from his chair and went into the kitchen. There was an address written down on a piece of paper. I can't go there, she looked at her big belly. Then I'll go. Alfred stood up in the hallway. No, I won't let you go alone. The time was getting late. They sat and waited and Carlos still never came back. Meanwhile, things were going terribly wrong outside the city. Carlos had had so much to drink that he couldn't stand up now. The rest of the group went through the man's pockets, took off his watch and shoes. Then they moved on to the house. They took all the valuables from there too, and then they just walked out the gate. Carlos saw this. He tried to follow them, but he could only get out of the gate. That's where he was picked up by the village security. Look, the homeless have gotten into this house again, and why are they so fond of it? Said one man to another. Come on, let's load this one. He pointed at Carlos. They loaded him into the car and drove him to the nearest station. No, he stinks. They were cursing in the car. Don't tell me. I better drop him off soon, or the whole car will stink, the other one answered him. Soon they were near the station. They unloaded the man, took him to the duty officer's window, and got into the car and drove away. Oh, we have company. One of the officers noticed Carlos. Eek! He was sitting up against the wall. Come on, get up. Let's go. One of the employees on duty took him under the elbow. Let go, he jerked. Oh, we can talk, laughed the employee. I'm a respectable man, Carlos said. Me too. The man nodded his head and looked at his bare feet. Let me make a phone call. He started yelling at the entire squad. I'm entitled to a phone call. All right, you'll get a call. They tried to calm the guest down. I need a phone. He started patting his pockets. Where'd you get those clothes? The guys asked him. These are my clothes, eek. They shoved him into a cell. Okay, let me put it another way. Where did you find them? The man in the uniform was looking at him. I didn't find it anywhere. He couldn't focus his eyes on them. Then what? The officers wouldn't leave the bars. I was drugged. Carlos sat on a bench. Yeah, we hear that every day, they laughed at him. Let me make a phone call, he begged them. Okay, on. Now was just wondering who he would dial. Carlos picked up the phone, looked at the buttons for a long time, and then dialed the phone number. Hello, Juliet. I'm in a bind again, he told his ex-wife. And again with the homeless, she guessed. No, I'm alone. He stood with his back to the staff. Dictate the address, but I can't come get you myself, she told him. After Carlos asked and dictated the address, she told him that she would call someone she knew to pick him up. That's it. They're coming for me now, he handed the phone back. Who the wife? They asked. No, an acquaintance of hers, he said. Okay, we'll wait. They looked at each other. Carlos waited too. He didn't know what acquaintances the wife had. He thought she would call someone she knew. But after a couple of hours, the employee who gave him the phone rang again. For you. He put Carlos on the phone. Yet he listened to what his wife was telling him. I couldn't reach anyone. The head of our town decided to help me, she said. Well, I won't be in debt, Carlos said, and hung up. So how long do we have to wait? They were tired of listening to this man's nonsense. No, the president is coming for me now, Carlos answered proudly. Why not the president? They laughed. Because my wife is not his deputy. He turned away from them. Yeah, the head is coming for him, and he is also from the homeless. They laughed even more. Laugh, laugh, laugh. Carlos paid no attention to them. He sat in the cage, even managed to nod off. And then the door opened, and Jack appeared on the threshold. Well, who's here to help? He came through. Hello, looked in all eyes, and could not believe that their head really came for Carlos. Hello, he looked at them. Jack, I'm here, Carlos shouted to him through the bars. Carlos, let's go home. Your wife is waiting for you, he hurried him. The officers on duty didn't ask him to fill out any documents. They issued a fine and let the man go. Wow. You and I were laughing, wondering if anyone would find out. They looked at each other. Thank you, Jack. Carlos thanked the man. You can save your thanks for later, but now tell me what happened to you. They got in the car. You see, I played this game where I dress up as a beggar and wander around town, and this is the second time I've been caught. And when they come after me, first Juliet and now you, the officers are dumbfounded that the homeless have such friends. Consider it the first and last time. He wasn't looking at him. Yes, thank you. I vowed even then that such a thing would not happen again. He did not want to justify himself to this man. They drove home in silence, not wanting to talk about anything. Will you take me to play your game? Jack asked suddenly. I don't know, but if I do, I don't think I'll be lucky again the third time, he was afraid. Yes, how you didn't get cold or any disease, the man wondered. I'm surprised I almost got my son involved, Carlos lamented. Okay, if you get a chance, dial right away, Jack smiled at him. Thank you again. He got out of the car and headed for the driveway. Good luck. Say hi to your wife, shouted the man to him. Goodbye, Carlos looked back. He was on his way home, and everything was churning inside. Juliet was going to interrogate him, and he didn't want that. I'm home, he walked in. Funny, Juliet came out to greet him. He stood in front of her barefoot, in pants and jacket. I'm sorry, he wanted to hug her, but she deflected from him. For what? She looked at her ex-husband. For everything. Let's get married again. He waited for her answer. Don't you have enough adventure in your life? She grinned. Yes, that's why I make them up for myself, he laughed too. Is that why you invented divorce? She guessed. Perhaps the man took a step toward her again. I'm going to have a baby soon. She touched her stomach. Here, we'll get married before that happens. They were still standing in the hallway. Alfred heard all this and was happy for Mom and Dad. He crossed his fingers that Mom would say yes. Okay, I promise to think about it tonight, she promised him. Thank you. Now I'm going to the bathroom. He walked past her and closed himself in the bathroom. He stayed in there for an hour or so, trying to wash himself properly. After that, he went out. Everyone in the apartment was asleep. He lay down next to Juliet, even though they'd slept separately before. What are you doing? She turned to him. Just decided it was time to reunite, he hugged her. Okay, I agree, she allowed it. When's the wedding? He smiled. I don't know, as soon as so soon, she said. Alfred would be pleased, her father knew that for sure. Yes, why they had to get divorced, Juliet didn't understand. Carlos didn't understand it either. The next day, Carlos and Juliet went to the registry office, filed an application, and were given a date in 2 weeks. They decided to do just a signing so that there would be a document. Juliet bought herself a light-colored maternity dress. She was happy again. Do you agree? The receptionist said. Of course, the groom looked at Juliet with loving eyes. And you, bride, was looking at her now. Yes, she was smiling through her teeth. In the presence of witnesses, your marriage is registered, at which point the only witness, in the person of Alfred, clapped his hands. And now, young ones, congratulate each other with a kiss. Carlos and Juliet kissed each other. I am so happy that you are together again, Alfred hugged them. Son, they hugged him too. After that, they went to a restaurant together to celebrate the event. And there Juliet became ill and was hospitalized. Darling, we'll come tomorrow, Carlos told her. I'll be waiting. She wrinkled her nose in pain. But no visitors were needed for tomorrow, because during the night, Juliet went into premature labor. Ah, screamed the mommy-to-be. Be patient, sweetheart, the midwife told her. I can't, Juliet wrinkled her nose. But you have to, she stroked her and made her breathe. By morning, a very weak baby was born and immediately taken to a special ward. What will you call him so we can call him by his name? They asked the mother. Jervis, she had thought of the name a long time ago. Fine, they left. And when Julia was able to get up on her own, she too was escorted to where her baby was now. He was small, covered in tubes. But she was told, Juliet, I'm sorry for everything. He hugged her. What's gotten into you? She looked at him and smiled. Everything is fine. While you were in the hospital, I thought over everything, how I behaved, my behavior, and decided that now everything will be different. He took his son in his arms. Now Carlos took care of his son all day long. He took him for walks, He bathed him, he played with his toys. Juliet only fed him and got up to him at night. When Jervis was 6 months old, Juliet decided to go to work. "I can't stay at home anymore," she told her husband. "Yes, of course. If you want to go out, I'll take care of him," he said. The boy had already been given complimentary foods, so there were no problems with nutrition. Juliet had gone to work, and now she was staying out late. "I get the feeling you don't want to come home," Carlos told her one day. "Carlos, you're starting again. I have a lot of work to do while I was on maternity leave. Nobody did anything. So now I have to do everything," the woman said. "I understand, but you're not alone now. You have a big family," he told her. "I know that," she lowered her eyes. Carlos spent more and more time alone with the children. He made sure Alfred and Jervis had everything. If the older son helped in any way, the younger son was just a distraction. "Juliet, I want us to spend this weekend together as a family," Carlos once told his wife. "I can't. I have work," she only answered. "If I had known it would be like this, I would never have let you leave the maternity leave so early," he lamented. "What's wrong with it?" She didn't understand. "Everything dislikes that you don't spend time with your family but only with your work," he resented. "It's work, and there's nothing you can do about it," she answered him always the same way. Jervis had to go to kindergarten, and Carlos took him there too. That's where he met Selena. "Hi, are you Jervis' daddy?" she asked him that day. Yeah, had he done something wrong? Carlos was concerned. "No, I just want to tell you that you have a wonderful boy." She walked next to him from kindergarten. From that point on, Carlos and Selena started hanging out. It turned out that they lived in the same neighborhood, so now they were walking the kids together, taking them to the garden, and bringing them back from the garden. "Where do you disappear in the evenings with the baby?" Juliet was curious. She had been coming home early from work for several days, and her husband was not at home. "I'm ashamed to admit it, but I met another woman," he told her then. "What? And you're telling me this out in the open?" She glared at him. "How was I supposed to tell you about it? Hide it?" He didn't understand. "I don't know." Tears came to the woman's eyes. Alfred had already finished the 9th grade. After that, he was going to enter, and for that he had to go to another city. "You won't see your son. Don't even dream about it," Juliet said about the younger one. "What are you talking about?" Again began the quarrel between husband and wife. "That's what I'm saying. I was with him all this time. Why should I give him to you?" They argue for hours. "Stop arguing. Better talk about your relationship and find out," Alfred approached him. "And you, even though you're an adult, you're still a little boy," his father told him. "Yes, but I love you both, I think, as well as Jervis, so I have the right to give advice," said the older son in response to this remark. Carlos left his wife for a couple of days. He rented an apartment. He needed to think things over. He had been seeing Selena all these days. The two of them were good together. "Are we going to be together?" she asked him. "I think so, but first we have to settle the issue with Juliet and the sons," he told her seriously. "Do you think I want your children?" She looked at him with big eyes. "What are you saying? I will not leave my children." He was shocked by such words. Veda. She saw that he from birth with the boys together, and now will not be able to leave them. "That's what I'm saying. I have my own children to raise," she carried. "Why should I raise your children and you say that about mine?" He didn't understand. "That's it. The conversation is over. I haven't come to that yet." She turned away from him. Their conversations always ended this way. "Were you at her place again?" Juliet would ask at home when he went back there. "You don't have to worry about that," Carlos answered her gruffly. "Also, then I'm filing for divorce again." She was angry beyond belief. "Well then, just like the first time, you won't see the children," he promised her. "We'll see about that," they argued. "You've started again." Alfred couldn't believe it. Jervis was too young to understand. "Alfred, who are you staying with this time?" Carlos was curious. "I did not change my decisions, and I have to leave soon." "So it turns out that with no one," he concluded. "That's great." Carlos rubbed his hands together. "I don't see anything great. I'll sue for Jervis," Juliet said. It would work out just like the first time. Carlos knew for sure. Once again, they both applied and were now awaiting trial. The session was held. Alfred, when asked, said he would stay with his father. His mother looked at him. and thought he had said that last time too. But Alfred didn't look at her, and this time he didn't think his parents would try it on again. Selena was sitting in the audience. She was smiling, which really pissed Juliet off. The court ruled the children are to be left with their father, banged the judge's gavel. How can that be? Juliet jumped to her feet. Out of the question. That was the end of the trial. Both women were unhappy. One didn't want to accept this child and the other didn't want to give it away. I'm very glad it's over like this, Carlos said to Selena. I'm not, she was telling the truth. It's okay, you'll get used to it. He saw Juliet crying on the sidelines, but he didn't even go near her. She was the first to start this war. Good, she was willing to do anything as long as the man was with her. We'll have to move, he told her. I'll do anything, she confirmed his thoughts. Then let's start dealing with the sale of the apartment, he decreed everything. They contacted a realtor who helped them in buying and selling apartments. Everything had to happen quickly. And already Carlos and Selena were buying a new place. But before they did, they signed to make it fair. I'm so happy, Selena told him. And I'm happy too, he echoed her. Carlos realized that this woman was different from Juliet, more caring and more in love with him. But it didn't happen with their children. Selena didn't accept his children, and he couldn't get used to her offspring. Jervis was growing up. It was time to go to school. Alfred was studying in another city. He was supposed to become a lawyer. Because of their distance, the brothers grew distant from each other. They practically did not communicate, also because the older one went to his mom and dad. He couldn't single out one of them. I'm being transferred to another city, Selena said one day. Does that mean I have to leave my business here and the kids have to change schools? Carlos told her. It turns out that's what she was adamant about. Good, then have a family council, her husband told her. They decided that no one was against the change, and a few weeks later, the apartment was put up for sale. With the help of the same realtor, they managed to sell and buy an apartment in the city where Selena was transferred. No one regretted anything. Only Carlos was uncomfortable now. He traveled to that city every week to do audits or deliver goods. Why don't you put your director in charge of all this? Selena didn't understand. Look, you have your job, I have mine, so you do it and I'll do mine, the man told the woman. The children were growing up. The parents were not getting any younger. Jervis was already in the 5th grade, and Alfred by this time had already graduated from the institute and went to undergo an internship in a law firm. He was doing well. His mentors praised him. He had a dream to defend the poor and those who cannot afford to hire an expensive lawyer. Many twisted his finger at the temple, telling him that it was not profitable at all. But Alfred did not listen to anyone. He was a frequent visitor to his father's house, but he did not forget about his mother. He came to see both him and her. Jervis, get ready. You're late for school, Selena told the boy. I know it myself. He put on his sneakers. Don't be rude, she yelled at him. Back off. He couldn't listen to her admonishment. All right, I'm off, but don't you ever talk to me again. She never got used to the boy. The only time Jervis was happy was when his older brother came to visit. Then they'd go out, socialize. The younger one could share anything with the older one. Does she hurt you? Alfred asked him. Not physically, but morally. The boy was silent. Don't be patient, answered. He advised him. All right, nodded the younger brother. So they could talk for hours, walking on the street. Bye, come back more often, Jervis asked. I try, but I can't always make it, Alfred answered. They were apart for a week or two. During this time, his younger brother was very ill. But the worst started when he was in high school. Selena, I don't feel well, Carlos called out to her. What's wrong? She came running into the room. I don't know, he was lying on the floor. Get up, she begged him. I can't, he only moved his eyes. Now she tried to lift him herself, but he was so heavy she couldn't even lift him. Selena called an ambulance. They came quickly, loaded Carlos on a stretcher, and took him to the hospital. Doctor, what's wrong with him? Selena came to get him. He's having a stroke. He needs surgery and then care, he told the woman. This is bad. She immediately thought of the children and the business. The surgery was scheduled for a day later. Selena wasn't promised anything good afterward. It was possible that the facial nerve would be hit, and it was possible that paralysis would occur, the doctor told her. Okay, I hear you. Selena was afraid of it, but she didn't show it. She disappeared to the hospital. She neglected everything. She took a leave of absence from work. Selena, what about your father? Alfred called her. He had a seizure, she said and cried into the phone. How, after all he is not so many years old, was surprised by the guy. I don't know, I found him already at home on the floor, she said. Okay, as soon as I can, I'll come right away, said the guy. I'll be waiting. And then Alfred called to say that his mother had also gone to the hospital with a seizure. Some kind of attack, Selena said. By now, Carlos had already had surgery, just as the doctor had said. He was paralyzed on one side. Now he couldn't walk or talk, and they brought him home lying down. Jervis was in 9th grade at the time. Since your father can't do anything on his own anymore, you'll have to do everything on your own, his stepmother told him. What do you mean by that? He didn't understand. That you should go to the orphanage, she was sure of her words. What are you saying? It's my father and we share the apartment too. Jervis started to defend himself. I don't know anything after your father is gone. He doesn't have any wills, so I'm the first Harris and you are afterward. She was unapproachable. And then Alfred called to say that his mother had also gone to the hospital with a seizure. Some kind of attack, Selena said. By now, Carlos had already had surgery, just as the doctor had said. He was paralyzed on one side. Now he couldn't walk or talk, and they brought him home lying down. Jervis was in 9th grade at the time. Since your father can't do anything on his own anymore, you'll have to do everything on your own, his stepmother told him. What do you mean by that? He didn't understand. That you should go to the orphanage, she was sure of her words. What are you saying? It's my father and we share the apartment too. Jervis started to defend himself. I don't know anything after your father is gone. He doesn't have any wills, so I'm the first Harris and you are afterward. She was unapproachable. Okay, you'll regret it, he promised her, and packed up his own things and left the house. The guy was proud. He didn't want to ask anyone for help. Hi, he dialed Alfred's brother's number. Jervis, I don't have time for this yet. He answered him and hung up. Okay, the guy took offense to that too. Alfred called him back later, but he didn't answer him himself. He didn't want to humiliate and distract him. Jervis didn't wait for Selena to call, or worse, to take him to an orphanage or boarding school. He went there himself. Hello, he said as he entered the gate. Who are you here to see? They asked him. And then Jervis told what had happened to his father and that he had made the decision to come here on his own. Well, come on in. The teacher was surprised at the boy's courage. He settled in the room he was shown. Now he had a roof over his head, fed, taught. But all this did not last long. Why did you leave home? Selena texted him. Because of you. He answered her just once. And at home, it was like nothing you could wish on an enemy. Carlos was lying down. He kept looking at the door to Jervis' room and mooing. What are you mooing for? He's not there. He's out of the house, his wife told him. He mooed harder. That was the end of the conversation. She didn't want to talk to him anymore. Mom, why don't you put him in some kind of hospital? The children asked her. She wagged her finger at them because she realized that Carlos understood everything. And Alfred, at this moment, was taking care of his mother, who was as sick as his father, and he was also providing the store with food and things to sell. He realized he needed to call back, or better yet, drive over to his brother's house, but he couldn't do it. Jervis, call me, he texted him, but got nothing in return. They hadn't spoken in months, which made it even harder. Mommy, I have to go away, Alfred told her. Okay, she said on an exhale. She felt just as bad, but better than her father. But Alfred never managed to leave, one thing or another, so he stayed here. He was planning to go tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, but he had something to do, and everything broke down. He could not tear himself between it all, work, mother, and he met a girl. Now there was no time at all, not even to call his brother. What are you looking at me for? Selena said to her husband. And he just looked at her and said nothing because he couldn't. He'd been lying down for so long that everything had atrophied. I wish you would die soon, his wife said to him. She was fed up with everything. The children had left to study, and now she was alone with her husband at home. She had to feed him and clean up after him. Jervis had finished 11 grades. He was going to be an auto mechanic. He decided that a long time ago, but the first thing he got was a summons to the army. He decided not to invite anyone and not to tell anyone about it. He just sat with the guys he met at the orphanage. The next day, he went to the train station. A guy got into the Air Force, which was good. "Hi," approached him one of the guys when he arrived at the training center. "Hi," he gave him his hand. "Let's be friends. My name's David," he said. "Mine's Jervis," he nodded at him. From then on, they started sticking together everywhere. The service went easily. The guys even liked it here. Time flew by quickly. Everything was almost the same as in the orphanage, except for outfits, exercises, and other things. "How did you get to the orphanage?" Carlos asked him. "It's a sad story. I don't want to remember it," he said. "All right, I won't bore you," he agreed. They were together all the time, almost never parted. When it was time to go back, they agreed to meet in a few months. Jervis went back to this town and got into the school he wanted to go to. "You're smart," his teacher said. "Thank you." He wanted to visit his father so badly, but he didn't want to meet Selena. He went to school, and then he got an internship at a car dealership. "Come work for us after your studies," one of the foremen told him after his internship. Sure, he would have asked if he hadn't been called. The boy continued his apprenticeship. He still didn't know what happened to his father, mother, and brother. He had seen Alfred's picture in the papers a couple of times, and they said he was a great lawyer and helped the poor. Only to hire him, you had to have connections or know the guy well. Jervis was happy for him. After graduation, Jervis went where he was called. Since his parents were alive, he didn't get an apartment, so the guy was left with nothing. He'd never go back to Selena. "And where is your registration?" they asked him when he got a job. "I have a temporary one," he lied. "Where is it?" The HR girl was waiting for him to answer. "I don't know," he shrugged his shoulders. "Then we can't accept you," she said regretfully. "Okay," he stood up and walked towards the exit. "Why didn't you stay?" asked him the same foreman who had invited him before. "I don't have a residence permit," he said honestly. "Will you come to my team? I'll take you on a contract." He asked him, "Can I do that?" He wasn't sure. "Of course, at your own risk," said the master. "Then I'll go," he nodded his head. From that moment, they started working together. "Where did you take that to?" Jervis asked John when he saw that he had a bag full of spare parts, not tools. "Quiet." He put his finger to his lips. "Working here and not stealing. It's no respect for yourself." "Okay," the guy thought. "That's just the way it is around here." After he saved up some money, he was able to buy himself an old car. And then he started carrying parts to build a good car out of the hull. So one day, the most senior boss came to them. Everyone gathered, didn't know what the occasion was, but they guessed. "So we got a rat, or rather, Nesson," said the chief. "And we even know who it is." All eyes were on Jervis. "You sure it's you?" The man was surprised. "What are you doing to me?" He tried to get out of it. "Here, open the toolbox." It was time to go home, and it was just about time to fill those boxes. The guy got up, went to his drawer, opened it, and clearly there were various spare parts in there. "Aren't you ashamed? We hired you without documents, and you do this to us," the supervisor was telling him. Again, Jervis was ashamed. He was ready to fall under the ground. Ashamed, he tilted his head. "All right, I'm calling the police, so the others don't get hurt." The warden took his cell phone out of his pocket. "Maybe you shouldn't." The guy looked at him. "I'll get it back." "You'll get it back. You're not going anywhere." He nodded his head, at that moment dialing a number. The law enforcement officers arrived quickly. They took a statement and arrested the guy. They brought him to the station. "Even though I'm homeless, I'm still entitled to one phone call," he told them. "What else are you entitled to?" They laughed. "A lawyer." He didn't look embarrassed. "Oh, that's funny." The cops clutched their stomachs. "Are you going to let me make the call or not?" He waited. Jervis was given a phone and quickly dialed Alfred's number. "Hello," Alfred answered quickly. "Brother, hello. I need your help." He spoke quickly. "Okay, where are you and what's wrong with you?" the man asked. Jervis explained everything to him. The latter was shocked. They hadn't seen each other for so many years, and only now he would find out everything. "I'll be there soon," he promised him. "So, is your lawyer on his way to see you yet?" The policemen were still laughing. "Yes," replied the guy calmly. "Good, then we wait." They sat down and watched the entrance. Alfred was still gone. It was understandable. He had to put all his business aside and come to another city. He's definitely coming. Jervis saw the disbelief in the policemen's faces. Aha! Suddenly the wizard will come in a blue helicopter. They began to sing the well-known song. At that moment, the doors opened and Alfred entered the room. The policemen immediately got up from their seats. They recognized him. How many homeless people he had already helped. There was no counting. I'm taking him into custody, he said, pulling out some documents and putting them on the table. Good, but there's a report on him, the officers explained. We'll sort it out, Alfred said. They left the department building together, got into Alfred's car. Why didn't you call earlier? He asked his brother. I called, you didn't answer, Jervis said calmly. But I called back so many times afterward, the older man wanted to cry. Apparently, at that moment, I had no time, said the brother. What about Dad? Where is he now? Alfred had a lot of questions. I don't know. I haven't seen him in years, Jervis admitted. All right, let's go to them. Alfred started the car. They arrived at a familiar house, got out of the car, entered the entrance. What are you doing? Alfred didn't understand why Jervis had stopped. I did not want to see her. She broke my whole life, he said honestly. Why didn't you call? Sighed Alfred. I told you before, I called, you didn't answer. That's all. And with those words, they rang the doorbell. Who? They heard Selena's voice. Open up, Alfred said sternly. Oh, what people, she turned the lock and you're here. The brothers entered the apartment. It smelled of urine. Yo, the boys wrinkled their noses. It's all your father, she said. Jervis and Alfred walked into the room. Carlos was lying on the bed. He looked really bad. One eye was bulging out. The other one was badly closed. Hi, Dad, they said almost in chorus. He doesn't recognize anyone. Selena stood there. You should have gotten a man like that, Jervis said in a whisper. We're taking him away, said Alfred. Oh, good, my suffering will finally be over, the woman exhaled. An ambulance had been called because the guys didn't know if they could transport the man in a simple car. Now they were going to the town where Julia was. She was sick too, but she was better than her ex-husband. I'm not allowed to drive out, Jervis said. It's okay. We'll be here again by morning. We'll solve all the issues, and everything will be fine. His brother encouraged him. They drove their car, followed by an ambulance with their father in it. They arrived home 2.5 hours later. Juliet looked as if she had been waiting for them. Mom, hello, and we brought your father to you. Alfred was the first to enter. He saw the woman's eyes widen. Keep in mind that you need special equipment for him, and it is better to invite a doctor, advised the nurse. Okay, we'll keep that in mind, Alfred thanked him. The boys spent the whole night with their parents. They set up the bed, persuaded their mother that it would be better for them. They packed up in the morning and drove back because Jervis had a reconnaissance. 2 weeks later, the guy had a trial. Naturally, Alfred was ready for it, so he had no trouble winning the case. Jervis was released in the courtroom and all charges were dropped. Now, what did I tell you? They were coming out of the courtroom. The same policemen who were there the night Alfred came to see Jervis were standing on the way out. They couldn't understand how an ordinary homeless man could call up such a tough lawyer. They didn't realize it was his own brother. All right, now go home. We have to sue Selena, the younger brother asked the older one. We'll definitely do that, and we'll get Dad on his feet, and he'll take care of it. And now we have to get you a residence permit, Alfred said knowledgeably. Yes, Jervis agreed with him. They drove back to their town, and there they quickly took the house book and gave the registration papers to the boy. After that, they invited the doctor, who said he would come every day and give Carlos a massage. It was good to know that he didn't say no. Julia could slowly move around the apartment. She took care of her ex-husband a little. In the meantime, Alfred took over his father's stores. There was no one to bring goods to them, and no time, so they vacated the pavilions and rented them out. Good thing they were in the center of town. Things seemed to be getting better, Jervis told his brother. We should have just reconnected, he hugged him. Yeah, he agreed. Jervis had vacated his father's garage and opened a tire shop there, and in a short time he had a lot of customers. He had money now, and he could afford a lot of things. He and Alfred went after his parents together, spared nothing for them. Dad was slowly getting better. And what did I tell you that it was Sveka did not look after him? and did not go, and now, look at him. Soon he will start talking. Alfred was happy for his father. Yes, Jervis agreed with his brother. He worked hard, so he had both clients and finances. Are you doing all right? His brother often asked him. He was kicking himself now for leaving him with Selena and going away. He should have taken him back to his mother. It wouldn't be like this now. Yeah, better than okay, Jervis smiled. He had recently met a girl at a concert, and now he wanted to introduce her to Alfred. I see you got an apartment. They sat and talked with his brother. Yes, I'm with a girl now. We need our own nest, Ars said. It's all clear with you. Will you introduce me? Alfred laughed. Of course, he wanted to do it himself. I'll take mine, you take yours, and we'll go to a restaurant together. Alfred winked at his brother. Good. Then we'll do it all this weekend. They were happy that they were together again and everything was going well. They shook hands and went their separate ways. Now they often met at their parents' house. Their father was getting better, and their mother was getting better too. The brothers talked to each other every day now. On the weekend they, as agreed, took their girls to get acquainted in a restaurant. Catherine, Alfred's girlfriend, extended her hand. Victoria, the Jervis lady, introduced herself. Nice to meet you, Catherine smiled. Nice to meet you too, Victoria confirmed. They sat and chatted together. Why can we have a wedding on the same day? Asked his brother. Why not? He smiled. Girls, how about it? And we agree. We won't have to spend so much money. Victoria was practical. Indeed, Catherine agreed with her. On that and agreed, but only with the date was not determined, but it could be done later. The next day, the young people, all four of them, went to apply to the registry office. I can't wait for this very happy day to come, said one of the girls. And me too. They became best friends. Now Catherine and Victoria were everywhere together. They chose the menu, restaurant, dresses, and the guys were only happy for them because they were not distracted from their work. How good, we found them each other, Alfred said and laughed. Yes, Catherine has a friend now, and Victoria too, Jervis clarified. The boys' parents could both sit up already. The mother was even talking a little, but the father was only mooing so far. Why haven't we dealt with Selena yet? And she's still the father's wife. God forbid something happens to him, she'll get everything. And that's not fair, Jervis reasoned. Yes, it should be done, but for that it is necessary for the father to learn to speak at least. Alfred shook his head. They had set the wedding date for late summer. Now it was only March, so there was still time. I'm so happy, each of the girls said to her chosen one. They echoed them, and even if everything in life was not as they wanted, but now everything was very good. The guys were working, earning a good income. There was also good money from renting out the pavilions, so the families were not poor. Alfred had started a court case about his father and Selena's divorce proceedings. And as much as the woman was against it, he wouldn't stop at anything. How dare you meddle in my life? The woman yelled at him. Believe me, this is our life too. And once she got into it, Alfred answered her. I won't give you anything. She was very angry. And no one will ask you. Everything will be decided by the court. With a little, the guy did not show her the tongue. I'll give you. She didn't know what else to say. Try it. The brothers laughed at her. What do you think? I'm weak, she yelled. Whatever, Jervis and Alfred were positively giddy. Once they'd made up their minds to take away all rights to property that didn't belong to her, so they did. The divorce took place, with Selena getting nothing of what belonged to her father. She screamed at the guys out of desperation. There was nothing she could do, and the kids couldn't help her. And Jervis and Alfred went back to their town and never thought of that woman again. Mommy, Daddy, can't we go outside for a walk? The children asked Juliet and Carlos. They looked at them. Juliet could already move around on her own, but Carlos was only in a wheelchair. They'd go out to the yard, spend some time there, and then go back up to the house. While the sons were away, Carlos was followed by his ex-wife. They must have been made for each other, since it was the third time they came together, the brothers said about them. Anything is possible, their future wives agreed when they heard their story. They were preparing for the upcoming wedding, dresses and suits were ready. All that was left was to find a good venue. Friends and relatives were invited, not a few, so they were looking for that it was convenient for everyone. Summer passed quickly. Here came the end of August. The wedding was to take place on the weekend. Juliet was almost healthy. Carlos also started to move. They were happy for their children. I'm so happy. Both brides to be said. They slept in one apartment tonight and the groomsmen in another. Are we all set? Alfred was worried. Yes, don't worry, his brother reassured him. Good, I'm not worried. They were already lying in their beds. The next day, everyone was near the house where Catherine and Victoria slept. Catherine, I love you, shouted first one groom. Victoria, I love you, as if the other repeated after him. The girls came out to them. All went to the registry office. Everything had been planned in advance, so there were no hitches now. It was nice to see that the groom's mother was also present. Yes, she is sitting, but it doesn't bother anyone. Do you agree? The registrar asked both couples at once. Yes, they shouted in unison. Then came the exchange of rings, the first dance, the rides, and then the restaurant. You don't know how happy I am, Victoria whispered. And I leaned to her, Catherine. They stood next to their husbands and were so beautiful. When the congratulations began, the first to come out were Catherine's parents, then Victoria's, and after them Juliet and Carlos. He sat in the stroller and looked at the young ones. My children, I congratulate you, said the mother of the grooms, a little inaudible. Aha, nodded the father. Thank you for being here today. A stingy male tear ran down his face. Thank you for everything, Juliet told them, and she cried too. She imagined that if there were no her children, there was no telling where she would be now. The party was over and everyone went home. Juliet and Carlos were home too. She carefully put her husband to bed, covered him with a blanket, and lay down next to him. How quickly life has gone by, she said to him. Aha, he told her and turned his head. Good night, she kissed him on the cheek and turned to the other side. A tear rolled down Carlos' cheek. The next day, the children had been at their house since morning. They thanked their parents for everything, and the Jervis informed them that they would soon be grandparents. What a joy it is, Juliet hugged her and her daughter-in-law. I never thought I would live to see this day. Everything will be fine. My father will be happy too, Alfred said. Aha, Carlos confirmed his words. They all sat together at the table. Afterwards, they went for a walk in the yard. It's good to be a family, the boys said. Yes, it's good to have a big family together. Juliet looked at her children, who were now twice as many. And soon there will be even more of us, Victoria said, and stroked her belly. That's great. What about you, Alfred? The mother looked at her eldest son. We are trying. They laughed together with his wife. That's good, Juliet nodded. Victoria's pregnancy was not going as easily as she would have liked. She thought that everything would be as it was at first, but already in the second trimester, the girl started to feel so nauseous that she couldn't stand it. More and more often, Victoria spent time in bed because she felt bad. 2 times she was lying on the preservation. And finally, this period came. In a week, she was to go into labor. Finally, this moment has come. She was writhing in pain, but still rejoiced at this moment of relief. Congratulations, you have a girl. They put the baby on her chest. Alice, she whispered and leaned back because her strength had completely run out. Just like Alice in Wonderland, said the midwife. Yes, and it is, said the girl without opening her eyes. Had the father been told? The woman asked. Not yet. I can't reach the phone, she said. Here, take it. Because they are already worried, she gave it to her. Thank you, Victoria dialed Jervis' number. Hi, my love. Your daughter Alice was born, she told him. At that moment, the girl was taken away. I congratulate you and thank you. Love, he cried. Why are you crying? She didn't understand. From happiness, he couldn't help himself. Victoria heard Alfred and Catherine congratulating her, and also someone else whispering. My parents are here too, he told her. Good, tell them hello. And I need to call mine, she hummed up. Victoria dialed another number to tell her mom that she had become a grandmother. Daughter, I congratulate you. Maybe I should come over to help you with the baby, she suggested. No, I think we can manage, she stopped her. Okay, but when you need to, you be sure to call. She did not bother the one who had just become a mom anymore. After that call, Victoria was moved to a ward where other young moms were lying. Now she had a lot to learn. Jervis had been under the windows of the maternity hospital from morning till evening, until his wife and daughter were discharged. "Congratulations," he told her again. "Thank you." They were all together again, which couldn't have been more gratifying. Today, they went to Jervis' parents' apartment, stayed there for a while, and then headed back to their place. Surprisingly, Carlos spent almost the entire time with the girl on his lap. Victoria was so afraid he was going to drop her, but everything went fine. "Well, now, if you take a walk, then come to us. We'll help," Juliet said presumptuously. Of course, the girl did not want to offend her. They drove home, now began a completely different adult life. "I love you," her husband whispered to Victoria. "Not you, but you," she corrected him. "Yes, sorry, you," he stroked the bundle that was in his wife's hands. "That's it, it's your turn now," Victoria told Catherine. "Yes, we can only wait," nodded her friend. Now the men disappeared at work, and the girls were at home with little Alice. "Do you think it will stick?" Catherine asked her friend about folk omens. "I think that yes," laughed at in response. They walked together with a stroller. Often it happened in the yard of her husband's parents, where they all breathed fresh air together. "It's so good that we're all friends," Victoria said. She was standing under a tree, rocking the stroller. Suddenly, a woman appeared from the corner. Carlos' eyes got big. It was Selena. He pulled forward a little. "What happened?" Stared in the same direction Victoria was looking. "It's his ex-wife, the one the guy sued everything from," Juliet explained. "And what does she want here?" The girl couldn't understand. Now we'll ask. The mother-in-law was not afraid of anything. "Why did you come here?" She came out to her. She came to Carlos and grabbed the handles of the stroller. "You guessed wrong." Juliet pushed her away. "What?" She didn't understand. "What did you hear? He's my husband and he's staying with me. Look what you've brought him to." Juliet pushed her away. "Let's go home." Victoria didn't wait for all this to end. As they approached the driveway, Jervis came around the corner. He saw Selena and his fists clenched. "What does she want here?" He approached Victoria and the parents. "She came to get him." Juliet pointed at Carlos with her eyes. "And what about you?" He smiled. And even though the man can do nothing, and in a wheelchair, women continue to fight for him. "Let's go home," Victoria repeated once again. "I hate that woman with all my soul, and it was her fault that I became a homeless man." Jervis turned to her once again. "That's all. It's in the past. And everyone knows, who remembers the past to that eye out," said his wife. They went up the stairs, Jervis helping his father, Victoria carrying the baby and supporting her mother-in-law. When they were in the apartment, everyone laughed in the hallway, but everyone did it differently.
As a child, Isabella had no intention of becoming an artist. All she wanted was to live with her grandfather. She thought she had only one grandfather in the whole world. An old sailor, long ago written off. And even earlier, many years ago, Grandma couldn't stand Grandpa's schedule of long voyages with short intervals. Grandmother, who was just over 40, divorced and then remarried and moved far, far away to the northern city of Peter. Their only daughter, Leslie, at that time studied at a music school and was considered one of the most beautiful girls in the city. Since she had a year and a half to get her diploma, and there she could already teach somewhere in the art school, they decided not to tear her from her place. But that year and a half turned everything upside down. John spent too much time on the road, too little time with his family. One vacation, he thought Leslie was in love. Too much of his blonde beauty beaming with happiness. At the same time, he was met at home by a sharply aged, maddened Ariana. Her new husband had at first allowed her to come alone to be with Leslie to babysit her granddaughter. When disaster struck, he flew in too. All gathered in one apartment, knocked into a pile of grief for which there are no words and not enough tears. Little Isabella, meanwhile, slow to discharge from the hospital. She was born too tiny, and social services had yet to determine the guardians. Leslie was buried right in the church. They did not call the priest home, but brought and put the coffin in the center of the temple, as if the relatives hoped to beg from Natasha at least there, all the light, if so suddenly everything for her was cut off here. Ariana did not leave her daughter's body. John and Ariana had lived in this town almost all their lives, and tragedy was rare. Everyone stood with candles, and Ariana lay on the coffin, hugging it with both hands. At night, the men, ex-husband and current husband, were afraid to move away from her. They were afraid to call an ambulance, or the doctors would not have time to get there. But by dawn, Ariana struggled to get up from the couch and beckoned John into the kitchen. "John, let's go." Shutting the door tightly behind her, she said, "We need to talk. And this, pour me a vodka." John looked up at her with darkened, sunken eyes, hesitated for a moment, but obediently opened the refrigerator, took out a bottle of Stolichnaya, popped the cork, and poured the vodka into glasses. "Something to eat?" "Don't? Okay. Break off a piece of bread. You know who the father is?" "Well, so she never told you. You know the owner of the castle? Yes?" Ariana's voice dropped to almost a whisper. He's the one." John gave an involuntary gasp. "How did she?" "One of the biggest mafiosi, to put it elegantly in Italian, of their region. A bandit of the highest flight, to put it in Russian. A tacit owner of factories, newspapers, steamships, which formerly had other owners. But in fact, the main money flowed into his pocket. He had two nominal names, which almost merged, Monarch and Monk. The first was born in connection with his power and wealth. The second he owed to the fact that, having divorced his wife, and having provided for her and his daughter up to the seventh tribe, he never married again. But the monarch was also famous among the people for having bought a picturesque cape near the town, and built a castle on it, descending to the sea. God knows how much of his fortune he invested in it, but the castle, or palace, outshone many of its counterparts in Europe, once built by famous architects. The beauty of the place itself, the sea and the cliffs, the walls with towers, the arches, the red roof with crenellations. Everything here did not impress with luxury, but so organically fit into the landscape, so poetically looked together with it that caused delight as a perfect work of art. The castle immediately got on postcards and magnets, became a local attraction. To it were taken excursions, both by land and by sea. But it was impossible to go inside. It was a private property and belonged to such a powerful and mysterious person. Ariana drank her half glass of 40-degree liquid like water. "Pour some more. Pour it or my heart will burst." Leslie was working nights. Not just her, but a friend of hers. They used to play in the restaurant. Ours played the violin and hers played the cello. And he didn't take her away by force. She loved him. And from what she told me, it seemed that he loved her too. And how it happened that they broke up, she didn't tell me. "Let me, mother," she said. "I'm like a stone in the water for him. A pebble." She was a proud woman, but it must have hurt her that he didn't look for her, didn't try to get her back. "Well, it's her will," John said deeply, "and here's the thing, Ariana. You and I are going to see him either. Not for a bow, not for money. You hear me? Whatever Leslie wants, that's how it's gonna be. And I'd have noticed at the funeral if you wasn't there, wouldn't I?" "How do I know?" "I've seen nothing but my Natasha. I'll raise the girl myself," John decided. "How are you?" Ariana jumped up. "I am. I'm taking her away with me." "No," he almost shouted, and slammed his palm on the table to make sure. "I said she'd stay here, in her own house, Natasha's house. I'll find a job on the beach, and all I'll do in life is raise her. And if you want to come to us, whether on your own or with your husband, you're welcome. There's nothing left in my life but this girl, and don't you dare cross me." And for a long time Ariana cried on his shoulder, and he hugged her, also as a child, and thought his thoughts. 5 years later it was obvious that the girl's upbringing had taken an unusual path. John's greatest fear was for her health, but to keep her wrapped up and raised in 4 walls, he could not imagine such a thing. On the contrary, he and his granddaughter went for walks along the sea every evening. In winter they fed the seagulls, and John told the girl various tales, many of which he had accumulated in his memory. He told them clearly, translating them into a language accessible to a child. Now he worked at the port, and not full-time, and devoted all his free time to little Isabella. In summer he and she never left the shore for long. They built sand castles, searched for beautiful stones and shells, went on exploration in distant lands, as they called those places where it took 2 hours to get to. Isabella in the summer months tanned to black, and her hair, on the contrary, burned out, became flaxen. By this time it had grown below her waist and curled in large curls. Isabella wore the simplest sundress. She ran almost always barefoot, even on hot stones. In short, there was nothing of a doll, a young lady. John taught Isabella to swim so that she was not afraid of neither waves nor distances. Isabella's secret love was the Little Mermaid, and she got to play the Little Mermaid at school, a twist of fate. Not modern Ariel, living adventures, mischievous girl, and the same gentle mermaid Anderson, who was to become the foam of the sea, since the tale of the Little Mermaid on the school stage was not supposed to, under the supervision of the teacher of labor, was sewn toe dress to the floor. Isabella let her hair down, and the girls from the same class got her a headband decorated with white lilies. The prince was played by the tallest and reputedly the handsomest boy in the class, Arthur, but he was not very good at acting. Father the Sea King, a flock of almost wordless sisters, they were only supposed to say a few phrases during the whole performance. The very beauty dream, to whom the prince was to leave, and the distant planned sailors on the ship, ladies at the princess, and of course the witch. That's where it all began. Isabella, as has already been said, was so reluctant to be on stage that she was completely confused when they began to discuss the idea of the play. Then the literature teacher who was in charge of the production and the boys agreed that Isabella should play the Little Mermaid. Isabella was cheating off Bernard's math, which she could not do, despite her grandfather's best efforts. Me? She literally gasped, panic in her voice. If it hadn't been about the teacher, she would have shouted, "You're crazy. I've never. On stage. No. Isabella hadn't really performed anywhere until then. She only read, like other children, in front of the whole class, poems assigned in the program. But she read in such a way that, listening to her performance of Tatiana's letter to Onegin, Angelica literally cried. Come on. The voice could be heard throughout the class. You can do it. And your eyes are so. Talking. Isabella's eyes were indeed huge, gray-blue under long, and paint is not necessary lashes. Isabella, the boys chanted. Isabella was well liked in class. Maybe it was because she never thought of herself, never crossed anyone. She was surprisingly good at not arguing with anyone. And cheat and English. Isabella found out that she could easily play even if her partner was a chair. She could even explain her love to a chair. But tender words were supposed to say to Arthur, who she had just pulled out of the sea. And here he was lying on the shore in front of her, and she was whispering confessions, touching his forehead and cheek with her fingers, taking advantage of the fact that the prince had not come to his senses yet. You're so beautiful. I love you so much. But Arthur heard everything, and at these words of the Little Mermaids, the prince's face flushed visibly. Then the witch deprived the Little Mermaid of her tongue. In the play she did it with the help of sinister passes, and the role of Isabella became mute. But Arthur, who at the beginning of the rehearsals was in unbelievable agony, for he too had been appointed to the part by order, and had never had any acting ability, was now always looking into Isabella's eyes, trying to take her by the hand, and not to let her go at all. Why are you courting her? Angelica shouted merrily. She's just a hand-me-down for you, a sea baby. You've got another girl. The other girl was played by the tall, stately Angela, who had a really royal posture. And of course, Angela extremely disapprovingly looked from the height of his height at all the tossing. Worst of all was the girl who played the witch, that is, the main villain. Anderson described her truly nightmarish. The sea witch fed the toad with her mouth, as people feed sugar to little canaries. She called the disgusting eels her chickens and allowed them to crawl on her large nostril like a sponge breast. In addition, it was clear that all the blame for the tragic outcome of the tale, the audience will lay the blame on the witch. After all, if it were not for her, the Little Mermaid could have explained herself to the prince and even charmed him with her magical voice. The witch, through sheer force, was played by Julian. It was supposed that she would be dressed in a kind of a robe made of rye, and her face would be painted with black and red paints to make it even more disgusting. And after rehearsal, Isabella saw Julian crying in the bathroom. What are you doing? Isabella was frightened, rushing toward her. I don't want to be a bobbyman. You're all like that, and I'm like a garden scarecrow. And a villain is villain. So why did you say yes? So Angelica said, everyone who plays will get A's in literature for the quarter. It's all clear with you. Isabella squeezed her hand tightly, let's go to, and dragged the furious Julian straight to the literature room, to Elena Anatolievna. She had just cleaned up after the rehearsal and was about to close the room and leave. It was 6 o'clock in the evening after all. Angelica, Isabella said as if it were a done deal, she's playing the Little Mermaid, and I'm playing the witch. The teacher didn't even understand what she was talking about at first, and then she didn't want to argue. No, that's impossible. No substitutions. You're such a great actor. No substitutions. This role is yours. I knew it right away. You can think about a theater career later. Isabella looked into Angelica's eyes, and it was clear in her gaze that Julianne could handle the role of the Little Mermaid. You won't dare to tell Julianne that she is small, ugly. Who will see it all from the audience? And there will be makeup. Don't back down. That's what her grandfather taught her to. Angelica, you're not going to convince me. I'll quit school. Isabella added as a final argument. Well, where are you going to go? The frustrated teacher slumped in her chair and asked Julianne, do you even know the part? Ta nodded her head furiously. What's to do with you? Rehearsal's on Friday. That's for you, mermaid, I'm telling you. And to you, to Isabella, I'll say goodbye until the dress rehearsal. The witch has just a few words. Think about the costume. Oh, you've given me quite a task. Once in the hallway, Julianne almost threw herself at Isabella's neck. Thank you. But how did you agree to this horror? Don't you feel sorry for your role? No, laughed Isabella. Mine now, is better. I don't understand how you gave it up. You're joking, Julianne said incredulously, and in her gaze Isabella suddenly read, had I been foolish? Nevertheless, the next day Julianne brought Isabella a small bottle of Ispahan perfume as a present, and they parted before the dress rehearsal. Only Isabella caught the occasional strange glances of Arthur. The dress rehearsal was to be run in costume, so the actors arrived in the assembly hall long before the start and dragged a mountain of junk with them. There was a tiny dressing room in the auditorium, but there was not enough room for everyone, so Isabella went to the toilet to change. When she slowly entered the auditorium, people almost turned their heads. Yes, the dress was burlap, but damn it, there were real seaweeds running down it. They were dry, soft, brown, and dark green. They smelled like the sea. It wasn't hard at all to get these seaweeds by walking farther down the beach, and to sew them onto a dress was nothing at all. The girl's hair was held by a comb of coral twigs, and no makeup on her beautiful face, except that Isabella was too pale. Voronova stunned the teacher. Make a scarecrow out of yourself. Translated by Grenard, who played the Sea King. And then he summed it up himself. No, there's no way. You can't kill me. The rehearsal began and went on as usual. The Little Mermaid, hidden behind rocks, looked at people for the first time, saw the handsome prince on board the ship. Bernard and his friends had skillfully carved this ship out of plywood. Then Juliana, the Little Mermaid, longing, wandered among her sisters and listened to her grandmother's consolations. Let's live happily ever after. We'll have a lot of fun. 300 years is a long time. Tonight we're having a ball at the palace. But that was no consolation to the Little Mermaid. Isabella was almost certain that in her heart Juliana had long since fallen for Arthur. Perhaps that was why she was so eager to play the part. The Little Mermaid went to the witch. Isabella was sitting on a large stone, a stool draped with a sheet, deep in thought when the Little Mermaid came up to her, begging for legs instead of her tired fishtail. The witch's eyes grew cold. The Little Mermaid repeated her request. The witch hesitated. Then she made a sign with her hand, inviting the girl to sit down. The witch's gesture was so sure that Juliana obediently sank down on the stone and stared at her. I will make you a drink, and you will take it and sail with it to the shore before sunrise, and drink every drop of it. Then your tail will split and turn into a pair of slender, as people would say, legs. Isabella spoke slowly, as if she were compelling every word, but her voice sounded sinister. And Julianne, who knew the role of the witch by heart, because it had been her role before, suddenly, here in the schoolroom, among the boys, suddenly felt creepy. But you will be in so much pain. Isabella drew her face close to her and spoke as if she were casting a spell. You will retain your smooth gait, no dancer can match you. But remember, you will tread like sharp knives and your feet will bleed. Can you bear it? Then I will help you. Can you? And she dug her fingers into the Little Mermaid's shoulders, and Julianne could have sworn that claws grew on them, and rays of light spurted from the witch's eyes. The Little Mermaid's throat constricted. Remember, once you take on human form, you can never be a mermaid again. The witch was already standing a few steps away from the Little Mermaid, majestic and beautiful in a way that mortals could not be. She spoke as if she had been through it all herself, as if her power had been earned. Only she didn't become sea foam, she became a witch. According to the script, the witch had another way out. At the very end, when the prince and his young wife came out to accept congratulations from their subjects, there was a thunderclap, the lights went out, and the spotlight beams began to dash frantically. What happened on stage? The audience saw in flashes, in fragments. The sisters covered the little mermaid with a white blanket, under which she squatted, and as if disappeared, turning into sea foam. And above her, standing on a rock, the witch raised up triumphant hands. And the next day, already at the performance, with a crowded hall, and parents and even along the walls crowded, happened something that could not be erased or replayed. At that very final moment, Arthur the prince broke free from the young princess's embrace and stepped forward, stretching out his palms to where the slender figure of the witch was frozen, bent on the rock. "I don't want them all. I don't want to be with them. I'm coming to you." And stepped forward, I don't know where, probably into the abyss of the sea, because the hall immediately turned off the lights in horror. I couldn't think of anything like that with all my imagination. And yet this performance had no significant consequences. School life went on as usual, except that Julian had almost stopped talking to Isabella. Arthur followed the girl around like a tethered man. He was so in love with her that it annoyed both the parents of the guy and the head teacher, who had an extremely negative attitude to the novels of school children. The head teacher was a heavy woman of indeterminate age, and Isabella was the most beautiful of the graduates, and it was she who became Anna's head teacher's fault. She seduced the poor boy. "You'll go to the panel. That's where you belong," she threw to the girl at the prom, making Isabella's eyes flap with Isabellan and resentment. It was only much later that Isabella guessed what was the reason for the angry and unfair words. Anna had a daughter growing up who was ugly, resentful of the whole world, and who constantly complained at home about her classmates. Guys at school hated both mother and daughter. After graduating from school, Isabella, without any problems, entered the Institute of Culture at the theater department. Arthur tried to stick there too, but he, despite the fact that the boy was tall, handsome, was rejected at the first round. He hurriedly applied to the Polytechnic, and rumor has it that a year later he was already comforted with another girl. Isabella was having fun studying. Never make a hobby your profession or you'll hate it. Well, what else would I be good for, huh? Small, fragile, almost weightless Isabella in children's plays could play anyone, girls, fairies. At the same time, again, as in school, she managed not to cause others neither envy nor irritation. At rehearsals went like everyone else, in a black turtleneck and black pants, so demanded the director that nothing distracted the artist from creating images. And the last thing Isabella wanted to do while working on the play was to show herself. She thought about everything at once, how to do better. Intonation, voice, gesture. However, everyone in the troupe worked with burning eyes, sat up long after the rehearsals were over, discussed the scenery, costumes, lines of characters, argued to the horse this character is really the embodiment of evil or has a secret of its own, and why this one does not find a response in the hearts of the audience, although it seems to be right in everything. We compose songs for the plays ourselves, especially a lot of songs for the Nutcracker. Corey used to play guitar. Silver doors. The night has opened up to us. No fear, no faithlessness. Love can't be beaten. Corey would shake his head and a wave of curls would fall over his forehead. He was always ready for the most unthinkable pranks, and he was Isabella's partner in many of her plays. Corey was now always hanging around Isabella's house, getting in the way. "So pretend seriously," said John. In fact, he liked the boy. By this time, the family had exchanged their apartment in a 5-story building for a small house with a garden in the suburbs. Corey helped dig the beds, pick cherries, and was an ardent supporter of cooking summer meals in a cauldron over a fire. "Well, it tastes different, doesn't it?" he asked, when they all gathered in the great covered gazebo and tasted his coolish, smoky, like on a camping trip. And Corey squinted blissfully, like a cat licking his spoon. Coolish, essentially a penny's worth of millet, potatoes, fried onions, and bits of chicken, really did seem like the food of the gods. About whose daughter she was, Isabella knew, of course, but that was all. John didn't try to blame her father or ask for any help from him. He had explained all this to Isabella when she was a teenager. "Let's respect your mom. She loved him for something, so she knew something about him that we don't. And help? It's a small world, our little town even smaller. He can't not know that you are there living, growing. If he doesn't offer to help, we won't impose ourselves. They live poorly, of course. John worked as a dispatcher at the port, and his salary, as he put it, was enough to cover his food and shame. Isabella learned to sew and knit early to update her in her grandfather's closet. Naturally, they never talked about unfashionable boots and stylish clothes. They survived like many others. They dug beds in the vegetable garden, planted cucumbers and tomatoes, prepared vegetables for the winter. In the house, too, they organized everything with their own hands, both Isabella and grandfather. The shelves and benches were John's responsibility, and on the curtains, embroidered by Isabella, girlfriends admired, handmade, and how elegant. Monarch, aka Alex, for Isabella as if did not exist. That is, he was somewhere, but in a parallel reality. What, where, and which gangsters had, and who reigned over them all, did not interest the girl as much as, for example, all international politics, wholesale, and retail. Meanwhile, the only official daughter, Ala, caused the townspeople not only unfriendly interest, but also a lot of questions. Once, in her turbulent youth, she could arrange night races on the streets with friends. They were not too careful of their cars and bikes, although they cost those, mother dear. Luckily, no one was hurt. Ala could buy for 3 days a graceful old palace, where the city museum was located, and celebrate her birthday there. Let the high season, let the city come to the tourists, but these days the palace belonged to Allah. Remembered, and the day of the city, Allah could not go out with everyone, and had a whim to organize a concert in his mansion. She wrote out of Moscow artists, much cooler than those who performed in the town square. By the way, the gates at Allah's mansion were such that kids from art school came to sketch them. It was such a molded beauty. Then the girl seemed to quiet down, and there was a rumor that she left either on a trip around the world, or somewhere in Indonesia on distant paradise islands. Allah was gone for a long time, several years probably. She did not return alone. She was accompanied by a tall young man, a blond man with the face of a movie actor, handsome from love dramas and erotic adventures. And this sweet couple began to play the family. However, everyone felt the lull is temporary. He never looked after his health. When he was young, he was sure he'd die in a gunfight. In his mature years, he did not spare himself, saying stiffly, "Business in the United States is not done otherwise." Several times the monarch still ended up in the hospital, kidney failure. As later told, hoping for high patronage later, to his bed, here even the language will not turn to say to the hospital bed, ran to the medics of all specialties, and even gynecologists rushed to offer their services. For Isabella in the theater came a huge black car. She could never identify their brands, only showed Corey with her hands. This one had this rounded butt, and the nose is very nice, with beautiful headlights. Corey would roll his eyes and say she wasn't even blonde when it came to car stuff. Blondes at least know where to read the make of the car. Isabella was called back from rehearsal. A guy of enormous stature immediately came up to her, took her by the shoulder. "Let's go to Alex's." To whom? Isabella was completely confused, not knowing whether she should grab the nearest stationary object, even that column by the dressing room, and call for help. Though against such an amassed man, who of their theatrical deadbeats could stand? "To you, Kulov." "Well, to your daddy, got it. Let's go to the hospital, he's waiting." To say Isabella was astonished was an understatement. So the monarch knows she exists, so he's calling her himself? It reassured Isabella a little to know that she was going to the city hospital, a crowded and well-known place, and not to some secluded country estate. Ambo almost dragged Isabella through the lobby. His steps were too wide and her heels too small, and shoved her into a black car, once again of unknown make, parked at the entrance. Isabella went inside, and the windows of the car were tinted. It seemed that potholes in the road did not exist for her. She flew over them like a bird flying through the air. "What about Alex?" Isabella dared to ask after a few minutes. Amble sighed. "The doctors say it's unlikely they'll be able to pump it out this time. That's what I heard. His kidneys are dead. He's been offered a transplant so many times." The ambulance drove the girl literally to the doorstep of the urologist's office. As she slid out of the car, Isabella felt a great relief. But when they got to the 3rd floor in the elevator, the ambo took Isabella to a corner of the corridor that seemed completely deserted. He opened a door that had no room number on it. I guess those who are seriously ill don't have a lot of luxury. Isabella had heard of VIP rooms, where half the wall was occupied by a plasma TV, a carpet on the floor, and an expensive cognac on the table by the bed. There was nothing in this room except a hospital bed of a complex device, they said multifunctional, and medical equipment that took up all the free space. On the bed lay a man. He was lying flat, and he didn't even lift his head to look at the people who had entered. Isabella was struck by the yellow, especially in contrast to the white sheets, color of the patient's puffy face, and the glassy hue of it. The ambulance let Isabella into the room and closed the door behind her. And though they both, Isabella and John, knew it was coming, Isabella cried and couldn't calm down for a long time, and her grandfather sat beside her and stroked her hand. The next day, the ambulance man, whose name was actually Frederick, called to tell him where and when the funeral would be and asked where to send the car for Isabella. "I'll come myself," she protested. "The cemetery will be blocked off," Frederick explained patiently. "You don't have a car, and they won't let you take a cab. Don't wait, just give me the address." In the end, it was just the three of us. Isabella, a little girl in a black dress, John, who was afraid to let his granddaughter go into the bandit's nest, and Corey, under the pretense of protection from the same nest, but really because he always followed Isabella around. Besides, he was terribly curious, and he was anxious to see how the chief bandit was buried. In the morning, Isabella ran to the market for roses. She came back upset. "I asked for black ones, and the salesman says, 'Why does such a young girl need black ones?' Well, tell me, do you want 5 pinks and 2 whites or 5 whites and 2 pinks?" I yelled, "Give me 6 black ones, my father's dead." Even those who knew Isabella could hardly recognize her in the faceless black dress, the black headscarf hiding her hair, the dark glasses. She wanted to be seen as little as possible by her family and friends. Suddenly she had a daughter from somewhere, and what Alex had with her mother. She considered it a secret and the most precious thing to the two of them, and she didn't want it to be touched. I mean, eyes and tongues. She'd stand there, say goodbye, and disappear. She would hope that no one on her father's side would ever think of her again. Frederick appeared as a true lord, in an iron suit and white shirt, sullen and businesslike. He said to Isabella, "Tell him to be at the notary's office by 11 tomorrow. Here's the address and phone number." "Why?" "They're going to read the will." "Yeah, you don't have a car. I'll take it." She stood for a few moments, then timidly, with cautious steps, approached the bed. The patient must have heard her footsteps and tapped his fingers on the blanket, saying, "Come here, sit down." Isabella came closer and sank down on the hard chair beside the bed. Now the man was looking at her and she at him. Isabella somehow did not understand or think about the fact that here he was, her own father, Alex, the great cardinal of their region. She saw a man who was very seriously ill, most likely, fatally. It is not to say that she never thought about a possible meeting with her father, and she was surprised at herself. She had no fear or excitement in her soul before such a meeting. And for that she had to thank her grandfather. John had brought up his granddaughter in such a way that she did not feel hatred for her father, nor did she have any expectations that she had been deceived. And now there was only participation and pity in her gaze. And he, apparently, could not even speak in full voice. He spoke weakly and faintly, barely audible. "I'm here. Thank you for coming." "Of course I did, but I only found out today that you were calling me. I thought you didn't even know I existed." "Fool," he sighed softly. "I'll tell you, since Leslie never loved anyone. That's why I let her go. She didn't know who I was at first. She fell in love with a man, and when she realized, when she got closer to me, what was I supposed to do? You can't take off your skin, you can't put on another. You can't wash yourself off." He covered Isabella's hand with his heavy, already cold hand. "When Leslie was gone, I repent. I thought like those who lost their favorite dog and agonize. I'm just saying that to make it clearer. I've decided that I'll never let myself get attached to anyone else. I'm not gonna open up. Because it was so painful to lose her, it would have been easier to die. 100 times easier. That's why I erased everything from my memory. For a long time. Until now, I tried to erase you too. You look like your mother. Leslie's eyes. Those big, big eyes. And like her, you never asked me for anything." "I have everything," Isabella said hurriedly. "But is there nothing?" And Isabella, without raising her eyes, with her cheeks burning, feeling that everyone was looking at her, and for many it was a revelation. No one had known about her for years. Isabella found herself at the luxurious mahogany coffin. Her father lay before her, just as she had seen him a few days ago. The same puffy face, yellowed skin. Whatever the medication, he must have suffered a lot, only he didn't have the painful crease between his eyebrows that she'd seen in the hospital. And there was a feeling that there was a special bond between her and her father, that conversation in the ward, the things he'd said to her about her mom that no one else had witnessed. "Thank you for coming," he said to her then, and she came again. Isabella placed roses at the feet of the deceased, then bent over him and kissed his forehead. "You'll see your mom there," she whispered. "Tell her I love her. I love you." And when she unbent, her father's forehead was wet with her tears. She tried not to look at Alla. She was afraid. She hurried back to her seat, and John attacked Frederick. "Why did you do it? Now everyone will see. Everyone will know. What will they do to her now? What does she want? She could have lived in peace like before. Why did you bring her?" "She is a daughter," replied Frederick adamantly. "Of course, they didn't go to any restaurant. And again they sat with my grandfather until late at night, discussing what this visit to the notary would mean." "I'll beat up everything at once," Isabella said. "You wait," John objected. "We never asked for anything for you, and that's right. But he's made up his mind. Maybe he wants to give your mother a present through you, to make her feel better that you're not so exposed. I'm old now, I don't have much hope for my grandmother either. But I'm already working. I know, don't get upset. But life, it's all kinds of things. Anything can happen. There's kids who are sick, they're raising money from scratch. And if he left you a little money, I'd be glad, to be honest. Even though you may not have known me that way. I really didn't know. Grandpa, why would I do that? I'll be hated by that very daughter. Did you think you'd only be loved in life? You have to stand up to hatred too, otherwise you won't live. If you're cowardly, you'll sit, as Frederick would say, by the gutter for the rest of your life. Besides, I don't think he's hurt his daughter if he even remembered you. Though, he has a difficult daughter, but I think he didn't hurt her. So you take your time, listen to what they tell you, and then we'll talk about it at home." The next day, John and Isabella went to the address. They were astonished when the receptionist, upon hearing the name, was as gracious as if she had been to the most important clients. "I have nothing to do there," John decided. Nodding at the notary's office, "I'll wait in the waiting room. Maybe they'll throw me a newspaper." The girl was even more pleased. Apparently, that was how Isabella was supposed to enter the office alone. Of course, in magazines and coffee, or perhaps you prefer tea. Sugar? Cream? Cake or cookies? John winked at Isabella, saying, "I won't be lost here, you see," and the girl entered the office with a calm mind. Emma, the notary, turned out to be an old woman. It turns out that she was at school with Alex, and she met Isabella not just friendly, but motherly. "Sit down, my dear. When your father told me, of course it was, I was very anxious to see you. Did he tell you he made a change in his will?" "No," Isabella answered timidly. "He and I didn't talk about it at all. We didn't care about it." "But how?" The notary seemed dumbfounded. She adjusted her glasses, then took them off and looked at Isabella without her glasses. "He must have made a deal with you. We saw each other for the first time. The last day of his life. We talked for about 10 minutes. He couldn't take much more, and we had more to talk about than wills." The notary coughed. Then let's wait for Alla, and then I'll read the will in front of her." A few minutes later, the door opened swiftly, and Alla and her friend entered. She was still in mourning, but it was a very stylish mourning. Black silk blouse with fine embroidery, black pants and high boots. She hardly looked at Isabella, said hello to Emma, and sank into a chair. But Isabella caught the very intense, appraising gaze of her friend. This handsome young man. He was looking at her so confidently and so shamelessly, as if he could offer to make love to her right here in his office, and it would be no big deal. Isabella stirred, clasped her hands. Compared to these masters of life, she seemed like a girl, small, thin, in a black dress on the corner of a chair. And why should she do all this when she already had everything in her life? There is a house, there are those whom she loves, there is a theater where she can be from morning till evening, there is the happiness of creative work, there is the sea. There is life ahead, in which there can be so much more, and new roles, and travel, and people with whom you can be friends. She listened to the notary listing what Alla inherits. Cash sums, stocks, more stocks, some kind of cosmetic clinic, restaurants, Several, I think. Real estate, more. Isabella stared at her clenched fingers, wishing with all her might that this friend of Allah's would finally take his eyes off her, and for it to be over, and for them to be let go. And suddenly, there was a dead silence. Isabella raised her head in fright and saw that Allah was staring at her and swallowing her saliva so hard that it was audible. "What?" she asked guiltily. "Did I miss something?" "Isabella, you get the real estate." Even in her voice, you could hear that Emma sympathized with her. She said it in a completely different tone. And then there were numbers, meters, address, and seeing that Isabella still didn't understand anything, the notary specified, "You get the castle, the very same one, and a monthly maintenance of 100,000 rubles." When were the changes made? Allah's voice was sharp and hoarse, as if she hadn't opened her mouth for a long time and suddenly spoke. And the notary's voice sounded impassive. "May 7th, 5 days ago. So you went to see him at the hospital? Why didn't anyone tell me? Why didn't you tell me my father had changed his will? I'm sorry, but I don't have to do this. Besides, it was my client's wish. But then you could call to tell me what he cheated on." Emma took off her glasses again, her tone cold. "I beg your pardon?" "He left, but I stayed. And that's something we could have worked out with you. Do you realize?" Allah shouted, "Do you realize that I'm going to argue?" "That's your right," the notary spoke calmly and measuredly. "But I doubt you'll succeed. With mutual desire, you can make an agreement with your sister." "With whom?" Allah asked in that mock humiliating tone, as if she were being asked to marry someone from the untouchable caste. Her companion covered her hand with the palm of his hand in a soothing gesture. "Allah, calm down. We've discussed this option." The woman wanted to say something else, but she rose abruptly and headed for the exit, leaving them with the bitter smell of perfume. Her friend stood up, waved his arm slightly, apologizing, and followed her. Isabella couldn't get up. Her legs, arms, and everything else that could shake were trembling. "Baby," said Emma, "can I give you some Corvaline? Or shall we just open the champagne?" For the past few years, Allah had been able to lead the kind of life she liked. She could live anywhere in the world and do whatever she wanted. She began to study philosophy out of nothing to do. She was staying in Thailand at the time, and Buddhism, so to speak, was at her disposal. But Allah did not last long on the way to nirvana. By nature she was hard, sharp, and her previous life had made an additional imprint on her. Allah remembered her childhood very well, which was in the 90s. No, her family did not starve. Her father would never have allowed it. But it was at that time she realized that all the issues that life throws up, you need to solve quickly, as if you are carried by the river and ahead of the rapids. That you cannot pity anyone. You will certainly and meanly deceive. Often it will turn out that the one you pity lives much better than you. And even if he doesn't, he won't help you. If you are in trouble, people are ungrateful. She realized that you can't get anywhere without cruelty. Allah remembered how they had moved from the old apartment to the mansion, and it seemed terribly large and uncomfortable. Although there was everything, and a large open terrace, and a tower with a winter garden, and a lot of rooms, which she never tried to count. The mansion bordered on the forest, and on winter evenings to look out the window was creepy. What if there were wolves? Her mother only waved her away. "What wolves?" she said. There was no one scarier than the couples in love who came here, at the end of the forest road, to kiss in silence, in the lap of nature. My father was laconic. 3-meter brick fence under video surveillance, barbed wire, dogs, not enough for you. Then at school, Allah could hear the conversations behind her. The place where her father and a few other acquaintances had built their houses had always been something of an extension of the city park. And no one liked the fact that now there were owners here, whose peace to disturb, undesirable. But my father never gave a damn what anyone else thought. Not giving a damn is a polite way of putting it. He'd say, "Fuck it." Then there was the dog. A car hit a dog on the road in front of their house. It's rare, in general, cars pass by here, if only a few times a day. The poor guy was just unlucky. It wasn't their dog, an unfamiliar mongrel. Allah heard a shriek, ran out through the gate, and saw this little reddish dog. Bloody, twitching convulsively. She ran after her father again, because he was the only one who could tell the chauffeur to take the dog to the vet. Her father went out the gate with her, took a quick look, and went back into the house. A couple minutes later, he returned with a gun, and with one accurate shot, he ended the doggie's suffering. Allah sobbed then, and her father gave up. Now he is not in agony and has gone to his own place. Dad was gone a lot, not only for long anxious nights, but for weeks. Mother would lie awake with fear for him, walking through those empty rooms, up and down the stairs, pale, crunching her fingers. Then she was overcome with anger and shouted that that bastard had probably had a lot of mistresses long ago, and they were sitting here like in prison, and they were not allowed to go anywhere. And it was true. The fence was up, but there were guards around the house all the time. The servants did the groceries. Mothers, rarely enough, 2 or 3 times a month, could take the car and go shopping, accompanied again, damn him, guard to go shopping or to visit friends. Allah was taken to school and brought back. "I'm sick of it," screamed the mother. She was young, beautiful, elongated green eyes, long Isabella root earrings along her cheeks. "Why the hell did you lock me in?" She almost shrieked. "I want to go to work, to people, to the gym, to the pool." "You've got a pool in the basement. You can drown yourself," my father said. "Can you understand that I know they can't get to mine here behind these walls? Or do you want to go to your fucking office, you fucking accountant? She's got nothing to eat." Ada was allowed to invite her friends to visit her sometimes, but her parents did not allow any of the girls she knew to visit her. Then this period ended. Her father, if I may say so, moved to a new level. His influence and power became too great for anyone to dare to raise a hand against him or his family. After the 90s ended, the bandits had to hide their weapons, get out of their trons, and behave like good citizens, or to disappear unnoticed. Now it was possible not only to drive quietly around the city, wherever one liked. They regularly went abroad. At first, Turkey seemed a wonderland. Then the geography began to expand to Europe, the Caribbean, Indonesia. More often they traveled without their father, only Allah and her mother. When they arrived, my mother always tried to get Allah into a youth club somewhere. "Get to know your peers and don't get bored," she said. As a result, each lived her own life. Ava learned to explain herself in several languages so that she would be understood. Riding a motorcycle was the most convenient way to get around wherever they went. Rent a motorcycle and go four-wheeling with the wind whistling in your ears. Ava always had a great fondness for the local bartenders, as she could impose any unfamiliar cocktail with an exotic name and then charge triple the price for it. She also tried marijuana with those notorious peers, which would be more appropriate to call suicide bombers. So they liked to race at night on the roads on the same bikes, so enthusiastically compared with the kind of connoisseurship of the dignity of drugs and their partners and partners, who changed at least once a week. Mother, although she was near, as if moving farther and farther away. So Allah was neither surprised nor saddened when she decided to divorce her father. "Just don't get him too excited about money," she told her mother. "Why?" She raised her eyebrows. "Now, thank God, there's something to take from him. I didn't torture myself for 20 years for nothing." Allah snorted insultingly at the word tormented and cut off. "Because I'm staying with him. You're not going to your lover's house, are you?" Her mother wanted to slap her, but she was wary. Allah could have done the same, and her hand was strong. Her mother was really going to her new friend, expecting him to give her the attention she had been missing all her life. Going out together, doing the house together, hosting guests together. What was wrong with that, after all? She didn't understand why her daughter was so angry. Allah was annoyed by her stupidity. Because this new slug and her mother and him together will live as they do now. Because it is not given to him or to her to strengthen the power and to build up her power, but the father does. The divorce has taken place. Allah feared in vain. The father did not go to the mother. There was not only a noble male, from Allah's point of view, idiotic gesture. "Everything for you, nothing for me. I'm leaving with a suitcase." There was not even equal sharing. Father had long foreseen what was coming. Mother got her share. Another woman would have considered herself rich, but mother shook her fist in impotent rage, repeating phrases about her ruined life. "He's going to fuck you now, let him feed you." Her father wouldn't listen to her. Allah felt like the only woman in the monarch's life. The only woman who would no longer have to share anything with anyone, whose capriciousness would be admired and whose pampering would be encouraged. She considered it a good tone to understand jewelry as a professional jeweler, and in general did not try not to allow herself anything unworthy, so that her acquaintances would not see her in a car of an unworthy brand, that her clothes would be bought in fashionable houses that could not humiliate the client with their name, that at the resorts where she goes, did not rest bull and shabla. True, having communicated with the golden youth of Europe, Allah changed her idea of beautiful. And now it was sometimes possible to meet her on the street in a t-shirt and jeans, and with a backpack behind her back. She began to realize that it was necessary to at least play into the fact that luxurious things are not a cult for her. Otherwise, in those circles, in which she sought to become her own, she too will be considered a bumpkin. Good for them, she thought, from generation to generation fed, did not know grief, they did not have to survive at any cost. After school, she had to get an education, and here parents agreed on the opinion, studied to be an economist. Her father didn't let her get excited, although he only had to blink, and a red diploma would have been brought to her house. When I'm gone, you'll take the empire in your hands, my father used to say, and you have to know how to manage. And Allah, not daring to disobey, went to classes and took exams, but she was used to disobeying, to living her own way. That's why from time to time she had a breakdown. Then there were those races on the night streets, but it was good that it was not. She was still on drugs then. She could urgently zabanduriat, right in the middle of the night, right after a night of drinking, to confess, and she drove to the temple, beat her fists and heels in the heavy oak doors, demanded to open it and immediately absolve all sins, and if the bishop was not something like a friend at home, did not come to the castle to listen to organ concerts, my father specially wrote out musicians, the scandal would hardly have been hushed up. Father refused, when she celebrated her 25th birthday, and wanted to invite his company to Gududut in the castle. But the castle, which cost fabulous money, had some special meaning for his father. He rarely let strangers in, reigned there himself, was within these walls really monarch, resting from the bustle, listening to the silence. He walked along the corridors, which made one think of the Middle Ages, in a long row, with his hands behind his back, and God knows what he was thinking about. Like any unattainable toy, the castle beckoned Allah most of all, and she kept a watchful eye on whether her father was going to marry again. That would be the worst of all. After receiving her diploma and trying to join the affairs of the empire, Allah quickly got bored and asked for a vacation, from which she has not returned since. She enrolled in the correspondence faculty of philosophy. It was mysterious and beautiful, a woman who Isabello's philosophy. And she went to the East. She wanted to write her diploma on one of the Eastern religious movements. Allah stayed in Japan for a while, then lived in Indonesia for a few years. Somehow she liked everything here. She loved contrasts, the luxury of the villa she rented and the simple, frank life of the tropics, where you can walk almost naked, eat salmon, just out of the sea and into the frying pan, and spend nights breathing in the scent of exotic flowers. She moved to Thailand where she met Mickey. God knows what he was doing there. She was living in Samui at the Conrad Hotel, and she wanted to stay there for a long time. In the mornings, and she got up early, she would sit on the sofa on her balcony, breathing in the fresh Gulf of Thailand breeze that ruffled her hair. And then to read philosophical treatises, sprawled on a huge bed and looking out the panoramic window at the silver surface of the bay and the sinking islands in it. Such a way of life is very disposed to philosophy, and a round bath with flower petals, and long sit-downs in a restaurant that looked like a pagoda standing on the shore. What was Mickey doing here? An American, by the way, and according to the opinion of those living in Conrad, an incomparable billiard player. Maybe Allah fell for his hands at first sight, hands with such sensitive fingers, hands that always struck the right blow. Mickey's hair was whitened by the sun almost to a flaxen color, and his eyes were as clear as this water, in which Allah entered every morning, wearing only thin strips of bikini. They got together quickly, talking in the restaurant like old friends, two compatriots. There were no Americans except them in Conrad then, and all the time to talk in English, a green boredom. If you swear, they won't understand, they will smile kindly and bow almost to your waist. And Allah was already tired of not having sex by that time, and with him sex was truly royal. Mickey let her enjoy it as much as she needed, until she was exhausted, and he enjoyed it himself. "How long have you lived here?" she asked him once. He shrugged. "Second year." She also did not know, nor did she try to ask in detail, what he did in life. "I play the stock market," he said, and that was it. Good thing it wasn't in a casino, she snorted, although basically the same shit. As good as Allah's life had been before Mickey, it had taken on a different meaning with him. They had gotten caught in a storm while sailing on a yacht, and although there are no big waves in the Samui area, They had been lucky enough to get battered. It was the first time Alla had experienced such a feeling of fear, and Mickey laughed. "You stick around till summer, I'll show you a real storm in the Indian Ocean, when the water is boiling and the whole world goes wild." He wasn't afraid of anything, and she, never one to venture into the extreme, had traveled with him to the jungle, and they'd spent the night wrapped in the same blanket, still gritting their teeth in the morning. She didn't think about the future, as long as she wanted it to go on like this, and they stayed here, the two of them in this tropical paradise, and every day they molded their world with their own hands, molding it into new shapes. And then she got a call from home from this parallel universe, telling her that her father was dying and there was no chance, and she had to do what she wasn't going to do in the next few months. Isabellum flight schedules, buying tickets, ordering cabs, packing her bags. She was afraid Mickey wouldn't go with her. She couldn't be sure of anything with him, but he took it for granted that he would go with her, and Alla was deeply, tearfully grateful. "We'll go to the castle," she said. "It's nice there too. I'll take care of things, find out what's going on, and then we can come back here if you want. I'll make sure you don't get bored there." And in the airplane during the long flight, she held his hand, like a little girl who is afraid of being left alone. And now when her father died, as everyone expected, something happened that she could not have dreamed in her worst dream. The Empire was sailing away. She had never heard of her father's mistress, that wench with whom he had lived long ago, and for some reason had not sent her away, as he had once sent her to her mother. To his mother he did not consider himself indebted, and here. And this newfound sister, which was not enough to wipe off the face of the earth. Yes, Alla would be desperately sorry if she was allocated at least some modest content. She would try to repel even that. And now the castle was floating away, the jewel in her father's inheritance. And the rest of the inheritance wasn't just passing into Alina's hands. Economist after all, she grasped the essence of the will at once. Not like this hen, who blew it all. Alla had at her complete disposal a trifle scraps, a cosmetology clinic, a couple of restaurants, a block of stock. And those enterprises which openly and unofficially belonged to his father, there were still their managers, and she could only have a percentage of income. To dispose of all this she could not. Father has it telling her from the other world. You did not become an assistant, hanging out in their resorts, did not learn anything. Suck now paw, look into other people's hands, how much they sprinkle you feed. She heard his sneering voice. Her sister, who was a newcomer, received a pittance of money though, and she would also receive it every month on her account. But the castle, and the means for its maintenance, so that she would not have to spend on it herself. All this fell into her hands as a ripe fruit. All this was completely unfair, and Alla was rushing around the family mansion. And now she was not allowed to go into the castle, ready to smash everyone and everything. Mickey, sitting in an 18th century chair, was watching her with the same calm, mocking gaze that he always had. "Are you going to leave me now?" she asked suddenly, stopping in the middle of the room. "Come on, my kitty, what are you talking about? I don't understand why you're freaking out. A young girl, poor, inexperienced, nobody knows her. The problem can be solved much easier, believe me." They had to get used to the idea that everything in their lives was going to change. Isabella had been released from the theater for 3 days, and they couldn't wait any longer. "What if I had gotten the flu?" she asked Corey. And then there was this long distance call on their old broken-down telephone on the nightstand. Every time they picked up the phone, he and Grandpa didn't know if they would be able to talk, if they would be able to hear, and this time they heard perfectly. A light, somewhat mocking female voice answered her yes, and asked, "Isabella?" "Yes." "Hello, this is Alla." Isabella was already clinging to the nightstand. "I wanted to invite you to my place. We need to talk. You understand that, don't you?" "No, I'm not going to take anything away from you, challenge you. We just need to meet. We're alone now after all, daughters of the same father. You don't have a mother either, do you?" Isabella paused. She needed to deal with her excitement. "Where do you want to see me?" "Can you do it tomorrow? 6 o'clock? Oh, you're rehearsing." "Yes, I know you're playing at the theater." 8 o'clock? 9? Feel free to make an appointment. You'll be picked up and dropped off. I live in Sunny Beach, you know. Will you come? They agreed on 8 o'clock. After hanging up the phone, Isabella recounted the conversation to the men. They were as stunned as she was. "She changed her course abruptly," John said. "Just now she was ready to eat you, and now she's tailing you." "Are you seriously going to go?" Corey asked. Isabella nodded. I'll go. She's not really gonna kill me. Corey shook his head and said thoughtfully, Who knows, who knows? The next day at the rehearsal, Isabella looked at everything with completely different eyes, confused by the role. She arrived at Alice's house when it was already dark. The neighborhood was alight, occupied part of the coast. The sea splashed under the windows of these mansions. Strangers couldn't get here. They wouldn't be allowed in. There was a guard post and a barrier. It was not for nothing that Alla had sent her car to pick Isabella up. The gates were welcomingly opened, and Alla met her on the porch. If you look for it yourself, you might get lost, she said with a laugh. Stone Forest. If you don't make arrangements in advance, the owners won't open the door. Have you done all your chores? Come on, let's go. She led Isabella into a spacious hall on the first floor. It was a hall, not a large room. It was decorated in a modern style. White, black, gray, the bare minimum. Glass, leather, metal. When they sat down, sofas and a low table stood in the center of the room. Alla intercepted Isabella's gaze as she looked at the fireplace, where the electric flames flickered. I don't live here much, she explained, but I need a fireplace here. It gets chilly in winter. And I don't want to bother with a real one to heat it. I don't even want to wait for someone to do it. I'm lazy. But here I turn it on and it's warm. It was as if she was beginning to recognize Isabella as her equal, allowing her into her world. No, he almost shouted and slammed his palm on the table to make sure. I said she'd stay here in her own house, Natasha's house. I'll find a job on the beach, and all I'll do in life is raise her. And if you want to come to us, whether on your own or with your husband, you're welcome. There's nothing left in my life but this girl, and don't you dare cross me. And for a long time, Ariana cried on his shoulder, and he hugged her, also as a child, and thought his thoughts. 5 years later, it was obvious that the girl's upbringing had taken an unusual path. John's greatest fear was for her health, but to keep her wrapped up and raised in 4 walls, he could not imagine such a thing. On the contrary, he and his granddaughter went for walks along the sea every evening. In winter, they fed the seagulls, and John told the girl various tales, many of which he had accumulated in his memory. He told them clearly, translating them into a language accessible to a child. Now he worked at the port, and not full-time, and devoted all his free time to little Isabella. In summer, he and she never left the shore for long. They built sand castles, searched for beautiful stones and shells, went on exploration in distant lands, as they called those places where it took 2 hours to get to. Isabella in the summer months tanned to black, and her hair, on the contrary, burned out, became flaxen. By this time it had grown below her waist and curled in large curls. Isabella wore the simplest sundress. She ran almost always barefoot, even on hot stones. In short, there was nothing of a doll, a young lady. John taught Isabella to swim so that she was not afraid of neither waves nor distances. Isabella's secret love was the Little Mermaid, and she got to play the Little Mermaid at school, a twist of fate. Not modern Ariel, living adventures, mischievous girl, and the same gentle mermaid Anderson, who was to become the foam of the sea. Since the tale of the Little Mermaid on the school stage was not supposed to, under the supervision of the teacher of labor, was sewn toe dress to the floor. Isabella let her hair down, and the girls from the same class got her a headband decorated with white lilies. The prince was played by the tallest and reputedly the handsomest boy in the class, Arthur, but he was not very good at acting. Father the Sea King, a flock of almost wordless sisters, they were only supposed to say a few phrases during the whole performance. The very beauty dream, to whom the prince was to leave, and the distant planned sailors on the ship, ladies at the princess, and of course the witch. That's where it all began. Isabella, as has already been said, was so reluctant to be on stage that she was completely confused when they began to discuss the idea of the play. Then the literature teacher who was in charge of the production and the boys agreed that Isabella should play the Little Mermaid. Isabella was cheating off Bernard's math, which she could not do, despite her grandfather's best efforts. Me? She literally gasped, panic in her voice. If it hadn't been about the teacher, she would have shouted, "You're crazy. I've never. On stage. No. Isabella hadn't really performed anywhere until then. She only read, like other children, in front of the whole class, poems assigned in the program. But she read in such a way that, listening to her performance of Tatiana's letter to Onegin, Angelica literally cried. Come on, The voice could be heard throughout the class. You can do it. And your eyes are so. Talking. Isabella's eyes were indeed huge, gray blue under long, and paint is not necessary lashes. Isabella, 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 the boys chanted. Isabella was well liked in class. Maybe it was because she never thought of herself, never crossed anyone. She was surprisingly good at not arguing with anyone. And cheat and English. Isabella found out that she could easily play even if her partner was a chair. She could even explain her love to a chair. But tender words were supposed to say to Arthur, who she had just pulled out of the sea. And here he was lying on the shore in front of her, and she was whispering confessions, touching his forehead and cheek with her fingers, taking advantage of the fact that the prince had not come to his senses yet. "You're so beautiful. I love you so much." But Arthur heard everything, and at these words of the little mermaids, the prince's face flushed visibly. Then the witch deprived the little mermaid of her tongue. In the play she did it with the help of sinister passes, and the role of Isabella became mute. But Arthur, who at the beginning of the rehearsals was in unbelievable agony, for he too had been appointed to the part by order, and had never had any acting ability, was now always looking into Isabella's eyes, trying to take her by the hand, and not to let her go at all. "I didn't know anything about you, or you. Can I use the you word? You and your mom. Dad must have loved her a lot, huh?" The last thing Isabella wanted to do in these walls was talk about her mother. She never would. "I can't say anything about that. My mom and I never got to meet." "Yes, I've been told." Terrible, of course, Allah said, to practically these days. From childbirth, my father probably didn't know anything. If he'd intervened, found another clinic, real doctors, she would have been saved. Isabella was silent. And yet I think he loved her very much. To remember her all his life, to feel indebted to her, that's a very romantic story. Do you have a picture of your mother with you? I'd love to see it. You know how curious I am. Not with me. Isabella interlocked her fingers in her lap. Grandpa has it in his album, of course. You'll show me next time, right? I'll probably leave again soon, but we'll still see each other sometimes, call each other back. You're not going to leave here? Not yet. I've got my grandfather and my job. It's a good thing your father left you some money too. Believe me, it's expensive to maintain a castle, but he took care of it. I recognize my dad. He's so abrupt, so rough. But when it came to business, you could always count on him. Isabella almost said that during that brief meeting she had felt a sharp pity for her father, so apparently lonely. But she restrained herself. She wanted to be very careful. The blond man in the white suit, who looked like a movie actor, looked into the room and then entered. He nodded to Isabella. "You've already seen Mickey," said Allah. "Well, let's have a drink, shall we?" She smiled slightly, waving her hands. "I mean, we're just now getting to know each other for real." At the notary. "Sorry, I was a little overwhelmed." "That's understandable. So sis, what do you want? Whiskey? Wine? Champagne? Or do you like something sweet? Liqueur, maybe? Try Pedro Jimenez sherry, sweet as honey." She went to the door, said something, and in a few minutes a middle-aged woman, apparently a servant, rolled at a table. Isabella looked at everything with the eyes of a beggar. The sherry was already poured into glasses, but there was also a bottle of dark glass in a wicker basket, and sliced cheese with specks of mold and fruit. "Well," cheered Allah with a smile. Isabella reached out timidly and picked up the nearest glass. She could not even reach for the moldy cheese. It was as if it had been kept in the grave. "Oh, I'm a fool. I'm a fool. I'll never learn to live luxuriously," she scolded herself. They sat there for perhaps 2 hours. Mickey was probably bored, for he did not enter into conversation, and after a while he bowed and left. Allah chatted relaxed and at ease. She talked about Thailand, sat down with Isabella with her smartphone, showed her photos, explained what it was, where it was taken. It was all so simple, even ordinary. Now everyone brought photos from their travels, shared their impressions with gusto, talked about what their interlocutors had not yet seen. Yeah, your own private pool. Can you imagine? If you don't want to go to the sea. I don't know how to say it, the sea. The ocean? No, I mean, it's 2 steps away, but sometimes it's still lazy. I'm telling you, I'm lazy. For me, someone would be standing over me with a parchment. Just like that, you pour yourself a juice, get in the pool, and it's not hot, it's a buzz. Then Allah asked Isabella about the theater. Does she play adult roles, or is it more childish? Is the prince handsome in the Nutcracker? Do they go on tour with the troupe? Hadn't you been to the castle yet? She asked. Well, it's gorgeous there, of course. Do you want me to give you a tour later? An office tour with my own impressions? And Isabella was not afraid at all, and the Spanish sherry was delicious, so they shared a bottle. Yes, Allah please, and I'm inviting you to the play on May 15th, we're opening night. I'll be there. Allah laughed. If I'm not leaving yet, I'll definitely be there. Mickey and I will bring you such a bouquet. It'll be the biggest. Do you like roses or lilies? Lilies, huh? What color? Or maybe orchids? Her voice was already completely drunk, and she was laughing. Allah, I have to go now. Otherwise Grandpa will come looking for me here. Let him come. We'll pour him a drink too. No, I'm telling you, let him come. Call him. Allah pushed her in the side. I want to see your grandfather. You're lucky to have a grandfather. Allah, stop it. You're going to fall asleep, and I can't get out without your help. Call me a cab. Well, what cab? I told you you'd get a ride. I'll call you. Isabella didn't get home until the second hour of the morning, when John was already fumbling at the gate, darting out into the street and looking at the road. What was that witch up to? And when Isabella arrived, he had not even the strength to scold her, for he was so relieved. Allah was lying in her bedroom, across the huge bed, crying in her sleep. The sherry must have been very good indeed, for the next day Isabella did not even have a headache. Grandpa, I'm sorry. Why you my fool, why you? He wondered. How could you? I'm the one who tormented everyone. I'm the one who started all this, with the inheritance and everything else. John rubbed her head. It was important to him that everything end well for her. He drank a glass of the strong cherry wine he'd left over from last year and reached for a pickle. Isabella salted small, 2 little fingers, young cucumbers with dill and garlic. It was unusually tasty. What time do you have to be at the theater tonight? He asked. There's a rehearsal at 4 o'clock, but she could not get to the theater that day. Toward lunchtime, Frederick called. Isabella answered the phone. You're home. There was a sense of relief in his voice that she didn't understand and became alarmed. I'm home for now. What happened? Stay there, don't go anywhere. I'll be right there. He came up very quickly indeed, and it was not a quarter of an hour before they heard the wicket door bang. Frederick walked briskly toward the house. He greeted John briefly. Let's go somewhere. We need to talk, he threw to Isabella. Isabella called him into the kitchen, where she and her grandfather usually discuss all matters at the round, literally round table. Do you want coffee? She put cups and sugar on the table. Wait a minute, Frederick said. You listen to me carefully now. There's something very wrong. And he said that the monarch's men are now, after his departure, divided into 2 parts. There are those who want to keep their place under the new mistress. And there were others, those who had been closer to the monarch under him, and were well aware of the dislike the monarch felt for his eldest daughter. They knew that the master wished not to leave Allah a beggar, but not to give her much freedom either, and his last order to take care of his youngest daughter so that she would never know need again was also known to those especially close to him. And another guard, called Shrek, whom Frederick trusted like himself, who the master also trusted, saw her lawyer come to see Allah today. The man was a total nutcase, Frederick explained, and so he came to ask. Shrek had heard whether Allah would fight for the inheritance, challenge it from you. He said he could try to prove that you're nothing and your name is nothing. Some girl. We made a deal with her yesterday. You idiot. Frederick said pityingly. The lawyer said, so what if there are DNA tests? It can be solved if you want. A girl. And Allah says, what girl? There will be no girl in a week. Isabella turned pale. It was a good thing Grandpa couldn't hear. She sank back in her chair. Does Allah just want to kill me? We don't know what she wants yet, but we'll figure it out. Why don't you just go away, and quickly? You don't have to think about where you're going. Your father has thought of everything for you. Frederick took a sealed envelope out of his jacket pocket and handed it to Isabella. There was no inscription on the envelope, but the yellowing of the paper showed that it had been in Frederick's possession for a long time. The monarch told me back when he said, if she's in any danger, send her there. But where to, my God? I don't know. I'm not supposed to know. And no one can know, not even your grandfather. Not a living soul. So you don't say anything. We know how to ask. Don't you go pale, dear. I'll leave now. You open the envelope. You'll collect the money for your things. Another envelope, much thicker than the first one. No cabs, understand? You go to the highway, hitch a ride, and I don't want you here for a while. I'll follow you to the back, though, so that if anything, and Grandpa, and Corey? Frederick thought for a moment, looking at his lowered hands, then made up his mind. All right, call your grandfather. Nan you all to hell. John couldn't stand it when he found out what was the matter. She's a child. Screw you and your gangsters, your inheritances, your relatives, your castles. Leave her alone. They won't, Frederick said. Even if your granddaughter gives up everything, Allah won't risk it. So, grandfather, pack your bags too, and think of a place to disappear to. For 2 weeks at least. I'm not letting Isabella go alone. John shouted, I'm going with her. Of course you will. The monarch, if he sends her to a safe place. And if he doesn't write anything about you, it means you can't go there. They don't give a shit about you, but they'll cut you to ribbons to find out where your granddaughter is. So we can't know anything either. John paced and paced around the kitchen. Then he would take his head, then turn and walk swiftly to the window. Isabella watched him with fearful eyes. All right, he finally decided. I'll ask the guys I know to take me with them. I'll go with them on a voyage to Batumi. Isabella clasped her hands to her chest. Corey, Grandpa, Corey. All right, if he goes, we'll take him, John said grumpily. But what about you? How do I know you're okay? I'll go crazy out there. There's no way out, grandfather, do you understand? There is no way out, and Frederick turned to Isabella. Come on, get ready. Will 20 minutes be enough for you? I'll wait here, yes, and make some more coffee. I didn't sleep last night either. Entering her room, Isabella sank down on her bed. She had to get herself together so that she wouldn't miss anything, get all the things she might need. And most importantly, to put herself in such a state of mind that she wouldn't become completely confused, to keep her thoughts clear. In a situation like this, that was the only thing that could save the day, while her hands were trembling. And with trembling hands, she opened the envelope, took out a small sheet of paper torn from a notebook, unfolded it. Her eyes caught the first word, Shada. Dong the Chinese sat on the terrace, exposing his small, dry, wrinkled face to the sun. It seemed carved out of stone. The rocking chair, too, had long since fallen silent. Only a light, hot breeze came sometimes. Only a carefree starling sang in the garden. A young girl came out on the terrace with a tray. She was about 17 years old at the most. She wore a pink silk blouse and black silk pants. Her hair was braided. The girl's pretty face was concentrated as she carried a tray. Dong's grandniece was named Sayulin, which meant dainty orchid. She was indeed small, frail, and graceful, arms and legs like a child. When the family was concerned about who would take care of Dong and help him talk to the people who came to see him, Dong asked his niece to send Sayulin to him. She can cook better than any of your kids. I'm taking a real treasure from you. And now Sayulin was carrying his lunch, a deep earthen bowl that exuded a divine fragrance. Sayulin had made chicken and rice noodles. She didn't forget to put garlic and bell peppers, ginger, soy sauce, and wine vinegar, and the seasonings that are known to be the soul of any Barian. Dong's thin nostrils flickered. Sayulin placed a carafe of cold rice same vodka, a shot glass, on the table. She smiled slightly. This was why Dong had asked for her to be the one to come. Sayulin was silent. She would not say a word, as if she were not there. But she understood everything with half a word. Can you feel it? Dong spoke for the first time that morning, and his voice sounded hoarse. Sayulin replied, Yes. How do you feel? Death is coming. I have to stay here. I'm expected to help now. You should be here, too, for now. I can't do this alone. Sayulin tilted her head. The meal passed in silence. Afterward, Dong sat there with his eyes closed, his face in the sun, unmoving, as still as a statue. Years ago, when that higher power, that voice of silence to which he obeyed, had called him here, there had been many obstacles. He came from another country. He didn't know the language. He didn't know the laws. And he didn't know how to pay bribes. He needed to settle here, and the laws would not allow it. No one would look at the fact that a small, not young, lonely Chinese man could pose no threat to anyone. So Dong went to the monarch. He went with his mother Xylan, who could translate his words. Surprisingly, he was allowed to see the monarch. Either the all-powerful master of the land was interested in the unusual visitor and wanted to amuse himself, or he thought that such a strange visit could warn him of something. Either way, the monarch did not risk missing something important. The Chinaman spoke to the monarch with his eyes half closed, as if he saw something before him that was invisible to the human eye. The higher powers have commanded me to be here on this earth, but human laws, the laws of your country, prevent me from doing so. You can help me. Why should I help you? The day will come when I will be able to help you in a way that no other person on earth can. I will be able to repay you. And the superstitious monarch, who wore a great golden cross, who donated cosmic sums for the church, who was prayed for a generous fee, in the 7 main monasteries of the country, could not ignore the patronage of that higher power, of which he had heard nothing until now. And Dong settled in a house for which he did not have to pay, and since then no one had ever asked him for documents. And now he had to pay the bills. And he had a rough idea of what the price would be. Maybe he'd come to take on that kind of debt and pay it off that way. Despite the fact that the future promised complete uncertainty, Isabella had packed only a small backpack. She didn't want things to burden her. Soon she was standing in front of Frederick, pale, collected in every sense of the word, and waiting for orders. Frederick drank the last sip of coffee. Let's go. You've got a bus station near here. Don't go there so no one will remember you. Keep going down the highway. Get a hitchhiker. Preferably a truck. Those chauffeurs aren't likely to ask you anything. Don't say where you're going. Name a place near where you want to go. Go earlier or later. You can walk to your appointment. Dress well, you'll look like a tourist. And there are a lot of them now. You won't be conspicuous. Baby. John hugged her tightly, turned to Frederick. Nah. Well, walk her out. Can we at least walk her home? Don't forget Corey, Isabella whispered. He's as carefree as a fool. Make sure he's with you. I'll walk her myself, Frederick said and stood up. Just don't look back, you hear. I'll be about 100 feet behind you. Isabella arrived in Pshada in the late afternoon, and it took her a long time to get there, so she had lost track of who had driven her to where. She remembered the address, and it was not without difficulty that she found the house of an old Chinese man in a small village. There was a bell at the gate, like in a fairy tale. Pull the string. And indeed, when she pulled the string, almost immediately light footsteps sounded, and a teenage girl opened the gate in front of her. There was no doubt that she was related to the Chinese. Zayulin bowed slightly. Then she spoke to her on the phone, telling her her story. Come in, we're waiting for you. She went ahead of Isabella to the house, straight as a string. Pink blouse, black pants. Dong was still sitting on the terrace, half covering his eyes, swaying in his wicker chair. The girls went up the steps, and Zayulin stepped back and stood behind the Chinese. Hello, said Isabella timidly. The surroundings did not call for reverence. A poor old house, a wooden terrace with peeling floorboards, a wicker armchair, a small low table, 2 chairs. But Isabella was very uneasy. Dong gestured to the chair in front of him to sit down. She took off her backpack, put it on the floor in a corner, walked over and sat down. She put her hands between her knees. The Chinese man said something. Look him in the eye. Zayulin translated. Isabella stared into those small, dark, impassive eyes for a long time, blinking from time to time. Then the Chinaman put the back of his hand to her forehead, held it there for a few moments, and then said something curt again. Stretch your arms forward, came Zayulin's gentle voice. Isabella stretched out. He took both her wrists and held them for a long time with his warm, dry, almost weightless fingers. It was the way you hold when you feel for a pulse. Then he let go of Isabella's hands and, looking into her eyes, spoke. He stopped after a few sentences so that Zayulin could translate. You're poisoned. You'll live another 6 days. It's a slow poison. It's a poison brought from the east. No one here knows this poison. No one knows how it works. They won't know you've been poisoned. Every day you'll get weaker and weaker, like you're tired. Then you'll break out in a cold sweat and your heart will stop. They'll say you died of a heart attack. Isabella looked at the Chinaman with widened eyes. So then, when she and Allah were drinking wine, could it have been put in the wine? Was all she could find to ask. It's very rarely used. Expensive poison. Very expensive. Royal. It's put in wine or sweets. No taste, no smell. 10 drops, death immediately. 5 drops, death in a few days. No one will blame the person who poisoned. Isabella sat stunned, as if she had received a very severe blow. Still, she had no courage. Modern man is helpless before death, pathetic. But what will happen to Grandpa when he finds out she's dead? She won't even be able to say goodbye to him. Or will she still have time to see him? Because now it's all the same. She doesn't have to hide from anyone anymore. That's what the phrase meant. And in a week the girl will be gone. She doesn't need to be killed. She's already carrying death inside her. There's no cure for this, is there? With trembling lips she clarified, it can't be hospitalized, can it? The hospital won't understand. They won't believe you. The Chinaman paused. He hesitated. I can help, he finally said. You? Isabella couldn't believe it. I have a remedy for this poison. What? I realize it's useless now. It's hopeless. I'm going to die anyway. You've said. You want me to give it to you? Is it the remedy? Why do you ask that? Isabella was crying now. I shouldn't want this. Do you think I should die? Or should I pay you for the medicine? The Chinaman's words fell like stones. Because if you survive, they'll try to kill you again. Dong stood up, small, puny, in a long, floor-length row. Stay here. They both didn't expect it to turn out this way. Dong could not imagine that he would ever encounter this poison, called secret death in his homeland, again in his life. Twice in his life, he had delivered people from the curse of this poison, and both times the killers had tried to follow. Leon arrived around midnight. He didn't know what had happened, but the time assigned to him told him a lot. He left the car in a nearby alley and approached Dong's house almost by feel, without lighting a flashlight. He opened the wicket door without knocking. His footsteps were inaudible, but Zealand was already standing on the porch waiting for him. After seeing him to Dong's house, Anyulan, without asking anyone, began to prepare tea. She did it slowly. She boiled water, brewed the tea in a large porcelain teapot, and added dried jasmine flowers. Men need time to talk, but they would need their strength tonight. Leon and Dong's conversation was brief. The Chinese man told what an unexpected guest had shown up on his doorstep, who her father was, and what he had done for him, for Dong. And then went on to what her father had bequeathed to the girl, and what she was now threatened with because of this inheritance. It can't be, said Leon. Why such a hard way? She could have just been killed. In the United States, how hard could it be? Finally, she could have renounced her inheritance in favor of that Shakespearean sister, Lady Macbeth. Why make things so complicated? Take such a circuitous route. You have a saying, Dong said slowly, for a rabid dog, 7 miles is no detour. A man knows his time limit. Leon slammed his palm on his knee in annoyance. Stubborn, both of them. All right, lead the way. And the tea? I'm sorry, some other time. So Yulin led him into the bedroom, where the nightlight was burning. There on the edge of the bed was a girl of about 13, small and covered with a blanket. Zayulin brought the lamp closer, wiped off something that looked like dirt from the girl's face. After that, the sleeping girl's face looked completely white to Leon. Is she alive? Alive? Zayulin nodded. I'll try to wake her up now. It succeeded only partially. Isabella opened her eyes, huge, gray, and looked at Leon and Zayulin as if trying to figure out who they were. It's okay, Zayulin said. You're okay. You need to hide at his place for now. This man, he's a friend of ours. He'll take you to his house. Can you get up? Isabella tried to rise to lean on her arm, but her arm broke, and she fell face down into the pillow. It was as if her body didn't belong to her. I see, Leon said. Stand back a moment, Zayulin. He tucked the blanket in and gently lifted Isabella into his arms. She weighed really nothing. Zayulin rushed over and opened the door for them. Leon carried Isabella out of the house and walked leisurely to the car, his steps still light and inaudible. Leon placed the girl in the back seat. Zayulin, who was shadowing them, managed to slip a small velvet cushion under her head. Let's go with us. Leon begged, get Grandpa here. Let's go. Zayulin almost jumped away from his jeep, afraid he'd drag her into. She put her hands behind her back and shook her head. Leon got behind the wheel and started the engine, trying to keep things as quiet as possible. He drove off without turning on the lights. Zayulin stood on the road for a long time staring after them, as if she were stalling for time, not going home. The ceiling of the room was flooded with sunlight. Isabella heard the sing-song voice of the stairs, and a few moments later, the door opened without a knock. With her head slightly ducked, low ceiling, sloping roof, a tall, not young man entered the room. It seemed she'd seen him the night before, or had she dreamed it? He held a large mug in his hand. "Good morning," said the man. "I thought you were still asleep, so I didn't want to knock. How are you feeling?" "Better." After a long silence, Isabella's voice was hoarse. "That's the most important thing. You're supposed to have milk, but I guess the store milk's probably no good. This is from the market, fresh." He held out the mug to Isabella, but the mug was too heavy to hold. The man sat next to him on the bed. He held the mug and Isabella drank. It wasn't very comfortable because the milk was spilling, running down her chin. Isabella used to drink like that when she was a child, and her grandfather would say, "Well, you've grown a milky beard." It was uncomfortable, but delicious. She drank and drank until the huge mug was half empty. They got along. Isabella was slowly coming to her senses. Leon put a small radio on the table and turned the wheel, tuning it to one wave or another. The sound was not the clearest, with interference, but it seemed that the music came to them from the distance where it was being played. It felt distant. They sat like that for hours. Leon was working on his chisel. Isabella was reading, curled up in an old armchair. The music changed to the news, and Leon reached for the wheel. "I can't stand this politics." As suddenly his hand froze, and in the next instant he turned on the sound for full power. A criminal case has been opened over a double murder in the village of Chada. A man who may be involved in this crime has already been identified. Isabella slowly brought her palm up to her mouth. Leon jumped up. "I'll call." "Maybe not yet. Maybe it wasn't them." Isabella shook in a way that the comparison, like an aspen leaf, wouldn't seem like an exaggeration. Leon returned a quarter of an hour later, and Isabella was struck by how blackened his face was. He sat down in the same chair he had sat in the day before, rubbing his face with his hands. "Well?" He and Zayulin shot them both. She was lucky, if I may say so. He probably would have been killed, and she would have been taken away and questioned. But she ran. She probably wanted to call for help. She ran very fast. She was shot on the run. In the back, first him, then her. Isabella sobbed. "It's okay. I'll figure it out." Leon's cheeks were turning jaundiced. "I'll go visit Allah." It couldn't be. 2 days later, Mickey said irritably yet lazily, sprawled in a chair by the fireplace. The fact that Allah was nervous was much more noticeable. She stood up, walked around the room, sat down again. She looked older than her years. Allah had always been very careful about her figure, counted every piece she ate, and was thin. Now the thinness was wrinkled, her skin seemed yellow, her hair hung in icicles. But it was perfect. Mickey exclaimed, even more irritated, "And you proved it yourself." "Yes, perfect." Allah agreed and put out her cigarette in the ashtray. "And she'll die beautifully, without suffering. And we'll show up at the funeral grieving relatives. Now think where to look for this living corpse." But we got to the Chinese guy fast. Yeah. Quickly. We Allah teased to find that damn Chinese guy. I had to. Do you know, literally and figuratively, how much it cost me? And now these fine people have made it, so I have to start all over again. The string is broken, but the tip remains. The tip. What are you talking about? So now we have to get the Chinaman's connections. Think about it. He knew the risk of sending that girl away. He wouldn't have entrusted that golden egg to just anyone. So he had someone close to him helping him, and someone with whom he could freely explain himself, bypassing that Shmakadaka translator. He didn't speak Russian. He understood some words. Now tell me, how many people here in the surrounding towns and villages speak fluent Chinese? It's as rare as that damn Chinaman himself in our area. He's a bitch. How much money he set me up for. I paid a lot of money for that poison. I wanted to put her down gently, like a vet would a pet dog. Well, you didn't want that so much as you wanted to keep us out of trouble. And now it's Yeah, now That's right. No accidents. Listen, we're having a gloomy conversation. Allah started to calm down, made a grimace. Let's have a drink. She went into the next room, stayed there for a while, and then appeared on the doorstep. "Shall we go? I've already poured." "Woman, you don't trust a man to open a bottle?" "God, if you knew how many of them I've discovered in my lifetime. I hope it's rum," he asked, not getting up from his seat. "No, just cognac, French cognac. And you wanted rum? Then pour your own." "All right, bring your cognac." I said, "Get it." I'm too lazy to get up from my seat. Allah brought a bottle on a small tray, shot glasses in which the cognac was already poured, a lemon, and a vase with chocolates. Allah drank her shot with undisguised pleasure and immediately poured herself a second one. Mickey seemed to want to take his time, but then he drank it down and reached for the lemon. "That's what a good cognac is," he said. "Easy to drink. It slips down your throat." "And yeah, I think it would be better by car," said Allah, unable, apparently, not to continue this exciting conversation. Let her be hit by a car at high speed. A random car accident. There are so many of them now. She reached for the lemon too, and suddenly shrieked. There was a man standing in the doorway of the room she had just come from. Mickey shuddered. How could a stranger be here, in a completely closed house, with all the alarms and video cameras, with walls as big as medieval fortresses, with barbed wire on top of them, in short, with all the things that were used to keep their peace and keep out the world for those who counted themselves among its elite? How could a stranger be here? "What do you want?" Allah shrieked. The man was tall. He blocked the entire door. "Me?" He shrugged. "I don't need anything. You're the one who needs to see this through, I understand. And you won't give up. Who are you? Are you from Isabella? Do you know you can't just walk out of here? The guards. What are you gonna do to me? Why did you come?" Allah shouted hysterically. She raised her voice deliberately, hoping that someone would hear, that someone would come running, that the guards would round him up. She was especially annoyed and frightened that Mickey didn't even seem to be getting up. She had yet to see him in a fight. In a man's fight, she didn't know if he could be her defense. But he wasn't even trying. "What will you do to me?" repeated the stranger. Allah squinted her eyes. "You'll be killed. No one here is going to know why you're trespassing, but you're not getting out of here." He nodded as if satisfied. "Payback should be the same," the man said. "You tried to poison a girl who was innocent of anything. When my friend saved her, you killed my friend. On your orders, you shot another girl, almost a child. You poisoned Isabella by putting poison in her wine. And now, a few minutes ago, you drank the poisoned wine. This is payback." "What?" Leon reached forward with his hand. The lid on the massive ring was open. The stash was empty. He brought the ring to Allah's face, who recoiled, then to Mickey's face. He tried to jump up at last, but Leon twisted him in one motion and threw him back into the chair. "Once upon a time, when I wanted to leave this world as soon as possible, a friend of mine, the same Chinese man. There was poison in the stash, a special poison, a merciful one. If you realize you must leave," Don said, "dissolve the powder in water and drink it. There will be no turning back. There is no antidote in nature. You will only have time to pray, to ask the higher powers to forgive you for all you have sinned in this life, and allow you to be united with those you love in the next world. You will only have time to turn to God." "You had time to pray too, but you spent it on threats." Leon turned and walked away. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Allah clinging to the table with her hand, struggling to stay on her feet. Then she sank heavily to the floor. He was not interested in the rest. The story made a lot of noise. About an hour after Leon left the gloomy mansion, the bodies of the mistress and her lover were discovered by the maid. In a panic, the maid called an ambulance, and the ambulance, in turn, called the police. Young, healthy, and vigorous people, not drunks or drug addicts, died in an instant, and there were no signs of violent death. No signs of home invasion either. Hell of a Sherlock Holmes, as one of the cops put it. The autopsy also revealed nothing. Both the man and the woman's heart simply stopped. This caused a lot of difficulties. What to write down as the cause of death? We tried and tested, because science was silent, stood aside, and could not suggest anything. In order to explain the one-stage death, they decided to attribute it to the use of an exotic drink, which the woman and her partner had brought from the distant islands, where they lived for the last months. Left without a head, Allah's people immediately stopped looking for her sister. They didn't care about her now, but the two who cut short the lives of Don and his niece, Frederick, shot personally. He remained loyal to the late monarch and punished anyone who even indirectly raised a hand against his daughter. All the property of the childless Allah, according to her will, passed to her mother. The woman was informed of this in advance. It was noted by everyone afterward that at the funeral she sobbed quite restrainedly. The tour of the castle for grandfather and granddaughter was arranged by some cool real estate or history expert. Corey had whispered to Isabella that she looked like a crow. The woman was indeed gaunt, black-haired, with a thin, long nose. And her dress, by the way, was black. She waited for them on the doorstep of the castle and tried to make her smile as friendly as possible. She led them through countless rooms and corridors for 2 hours, so that John's feet were desperately sore. "Here," said the crow, opening another door, "is the collection of icons, which contains very valuable exhibits. There are well-preserved specimens from the 14th, 15th, and 16th centuries. The covers are of splendid artistic workmanship and are decorated with pearls, precious and semi-precious stones." Eventually, Isabella and Corey escaped. They slammed the doors of the rooms at random and eventually found themselves in one of them, which was clearly a bedroom. There was a bed under a crimson canopy, a painting on the ceiling of a shepherd boy and a shepherdess in idyllic poses. He playing a piper, she sitting on his lap. A huge chandelier with electric bulbs tapered to look like candles hung low. "A chandelier once fell on me at home," Isabella said. "I was asleep, and it just snapped and hung on the wire. I woke up thinking someone had attacked me." "Oh, what a balcony." "The balcony was really gorgeous. The lattice alone was worth it. The hermitage. And what a view from here. You'll be sitting with a glass of champagne and admiring the sunrise over the sea," Corey said. Isabella wrinkled her nose. "What's the depth of this place? What if you can dive off the balcony like a ski jump?" They lay on the bed under the canopy for a while longer. They lay cheek to cheek and panted after running around the castle. "You're the richest bride we have in town now," Corey said thoughtfully. Isabella became angry. "What a lot of thoughts you're having today, one sillier than the other." "Well, go ahead." Corey staggered back. Such a thought had certainly never occurred to him. For years now, Isabella had been like a sister to him. Isabella jumped off the bed and shook off her skirt. She felt like everything in the castle was soaked with dust. "Let's go find Grandpa." They found John and Crow in the basement where the tour ended. There were wine cellars. They sat at the lawn oak table with their grandfather and tasted the wine, which burned amber in the sunlight. "Madeira," Crow said in a slurred voice. "Favorite wine." "How?" Dad wanted to imitate too. "What are you going to do with this big thing?" said John. "What are you going to do with it? Are we going to move in here? You and I will be walking in the morning, and even then we won't find each other." "Not a problem," said Isabella. "I'll donate this huge thing to the theater." Frederick's jaw dropped, of course, and so did everyone else in the room. The conservatory would have a great foyer. Isabella had already taken a good look at everything during the tour and had a keen eye for everything. "And the canopy bed will be useful too," she added menacingly. "It's very good for strangling Desdemona. If Othello doesn't suffocate her, she will suffocate herself from the dust." A few days later, Isabella's picture, a young heiress and philanthropist, appeared on the cover of a glossy magazine. The head teacher, Anna, who had once taught the girl and predicted that she would have a career on the panel, saw the magazine in a kiosk and could not believe her eyes. And then she bought it, hoping that it was a mistake, read the article and became numb. The girl from a poor family, whom she wished the worst for, and just laughed at her. Shame on her.